relief when I felt something smack my tank from behind. I looked up and my dive buddy's eyes were like saucers. The bump was from one of 3 bottlenose dolphins. They circled around us for a few minutes and darted away. We were just awestruck and 80
I figured out how to
feet
do it
with 30
without
pounds
the
of
GameCube
gear while
controller,
these
so I
amazing
need
animals
to
had a good time around
change back
us.
to settings.
Humbling. You're lucky. One of my friends pulled himself up on top of what looked like a raised concrete platform. Turned out to be a vat of cow crap with a crusted layer on top. He got on top of the outside wall, took one step, and fell through and nearly drowned in liquid cow crap, vomited everywhere, jumped into a nearby river fully clothed to get it off. Details, please.
Leftovers.
This is
What can I
amazing.
give it to?
I have a couple. One, downtown Vancouver,
Come on,
in line for a bar at about 1130 p.m. Homeless guy walks by me, about 20 feet, drops his pants, and takes the wettest crap I've ever seen, right on the sidewalk. 2, high school, hanging out with a friend in his bedroom. He gets into a fight with his dad.
So what?
Dad barges into room, and my friend simultaneously shuts the door on his finger. Finger came off. Now that I think about it, I live a pretty sheltered life. Thanks Western civilization. Dad barges into room, and my friend simultaneously shuts the door on his finger. Finger came off.
Oh god.
Oh my god. My weirdest experience was also in
My name is
Indianapolis.
Vinny and
I
I'm
was
Frank.
sitting at a light in a convertible, and a truck driver pulls up and shouts, "Hey, you'll
You're-
want some mayonnaise," and then picks up
you're
a huge
homophobic,
64
transphobic,
ounce
all
plus
that.
container of mayo and throws it at me. Thankfully I caught it. Could have gone horribly awry, though. Still to this day I don't know why this happened. Edit. Recurring question. Not only did I eat the mayo, I was on my way to a cookout, so a lot of people ate it. Refreshingly funny ridiculous in the midst of this horrific thread. I was on vacation with my family in San Francisco. 2 homeless men got into a shouting match. One yelled "chew on this," Fricky, rushed a flock of pigeons, grabbed one in his hands, and hurled it at the other homeless man. The other man caught the pigeon in one hand, he had a trumpet in the other, and yelled back "respect all God's creatures," and tossed it into the air. The pigeon flew away, and the man resumed playing his trumpet. Chew on this, Fricky, has to be the greatest statement of all time. I was in Nick for a meeting with a co-worker in June of this past year. Since it was an amazing day out, we decided to have our meeting out in one of the local parks since it was an informal meeting and both of us wanted to enjoy the weather. After spending the morning going through our business, we both decided on lunch. Before we left I needed to find a restroom. There was a public restroom in this park. It was well maintained and clean but really busy. Since all the urinals were taken up, I stepped into a stall and did my business. As I am leaving the stall, I am careful to not swing the door open quickly since there were quite a few people in the restroom. Since I am stepping out slowly, I happen to notice a guy walk in wearing an apron for one of the local coffee places nearby. He walks up to a single urinal, not a trough, a single urinal that is already occupied by someone. Squeezes in next to the guy and ends up pee on the other guy's hands. It happened so quickly that the original urinator had no idea what was happening. He backed away from the urinal staring at his hand screaming, "What the frick? What the frick?" The guy with the coffee apron never stopped peeing, just said over and over, "Sorry man." The guy who got peed on threw a punch in the crowded bathroom and the coffee apron guy still never stopped peeing. I decided I did not want to be in that bathroom any longer and quickly snuck out. The coffee apron guy should have gotten a buddy to flank the dude's other side and box him in, then start a casual conversation as if he wasn't there. Driving through Cleveland I saw a naked fat homeless man rolling around on the sidewalk as some super skinny woman with just pants and a durag, SP, no shirt or bra, was screaming at him and kicking him as he rolled down the street. That was the mayor, for your information.
My god, what's going on?
And she glanced at the rear view mirror and said, "Oh my god." I glanced back and saw a truck flipping end over end. Not rolling sideways, flipping end over end. My brother-in-law and I ran back to help, leaving my sister and nephew a ways off because we knew it was going to be gruesome. The driver, a teenage girl, crawled out and stood up, without a scratch. Apparently she pulled into the other lane to pass, but there were cars coming before she could make it back in, so she swerved off onto the shoulder and started flipping. When I was 18 I watched my father die on a random driveway and I gave him CPR.
Okay, the mic should be working. Might end up just muting the.
He had a heart attack while on a walk with my mother and she ran inside a house and called 911 and me. I was an EMT, off duty at home. At the time showed up at the same time as emergency services. When I got on scene I started doing chest compressions as a firefighter used an ambu bag on him for air. I clearly remember every second of the incident and I can and have written it out many times in an effort to deal with it and get it out of my head. I used to have horrible nightmares and I couldn't get the thought of my father's vomit
No, I
covered
can
dead face
hear
out of
like.
my mind for a good
Are you
2
washing
hours.
dishes?
After a few minutes of CPR a
Oh, what was that
defibrillator
noise?
showed up and they shocked my dad once. He
I was
regained a
washing.
sinus rhythm for a moment and then
I was drinking your
flatlined
alcohol.
again. We put him in an ambulance and sent him to the hospital. He was declared DOA. I remember my mother softly holding back tears and asking if everything was going
You know,
to
like
be
when you
okay.
like eat something,
I was 18 and
you
didn't
clean
know
the bowl
what
like
to
really
say,
quickly, but you
so
still
I
place it in the
said,
sink because it's not
nobody
clean.
is dead till a
Mm-hmm.
doctor says they're dead.
That's right.
She told me to go
Oh.
home and call our family to let them know what happened. When I got home I cried my eyes out and then got ready to call my
Okay,
dad's
can we
mom,
please fight
sister,
that already?
and
I want to
brother,
actually
brother,
play the game
sister
now.
and my mom's mother. Before I could muster the strength to call, my mother called from the hospital to say the doctors had declared him dead. I then had to tell my grandmother that her son was dead and his brother and sister their brother was dead. I had to tell my siblings that our father was dead. It was fricked up. I hate thinking about it and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I feel a little numb writing
I have
it
no
out
idea where
here.
to go.
It brings back crazy flashes of images I don't ever
Great.
want in my head again. Me and two friends decided to go to the local 24 hours grocery store. Friend A happened to have the gorilla suit, used for freaking with other
I would say
people
that,
in
but
public,
like,
in his
things you
trunk.
say on the internet
Friend
apparently
B
I'm not.
decides that we will
Say
buy
what?
our freaking
The gorilla
pizzas
suit?
dressed as a gorilla. He
Oh.
dons the suit and we go into the store.
You want to be dressed as a
It is
gorilla?
3
Wow.
a.m. The store is mostly empty, and we laugh as several employees
Some
give us odd
like
looks
really
or
wow.
chuckle
Who's gonna
at the
say?
spectacle. As we walk by one aisle, I look over and see a giant yellow
Very wow.
chicken staring back. Two different groups of people, without any planning beforehand, managed to dress up as animals, go to the
Something
same
like-
store at the same hour. 3 a.m. Gorilla and chicken stare at each other intensely and prepare to fight, but everybody was too busy thinking, holy fricking what the frick. The employees all
Oh my
presumably
god,
assumed we had
I have
gathered
no idea where to
together before entering the
go.
store. But to this day, I can't help but imagine the laws of ludicrousness set that moment to be the most important night of our lives.
Go where the morning sun
Unfortunately,
shines.
we got scared and ran from the store with our
Thanks.
frozen pizzas in snow. trying to
That helped
forget
a
the
lot.
unbelievable coincidence
Where
that
the
we
money,
had just
the morning
witnessed.
sun shines.
Pizza wasn't that great either. Animal gang
The
war.
night,
Holy crap.
the night
I've
blooms.
seen numerous
That helped a lot.
accidents,
Thanks.
knife fights, you name it, but Mother Nature kicked
2
all
years
the
from
butts
now.
this year. We were down
20
in
years from
Baja
now,
beach called Los
you will know
Cerritos.
Dawn.
I was a knee
Wait,
deep
let me
with
actually,
my
me
daughter
actually
when
pull the
someone
actual
yelled,
statement.
"Well!"
What the hell is
Usually this
Dawn?
means someone spotted a spout or something. So I'm
Give me a
thinking
second.
no big deal. Well,
You wanna
a
play League of
second or
Legends
two
where
later, someone else
Lego
yelled,
Legends.
so
You
I
can play
looked up
Lego
and there they
Legends.
were, a huge gathering of humpback whales.
I'll play your League
Breaching,
of Legends.
Hey yo, Mel, where do I go?
tail wagging.
I don't know, I've
I've
never
seen
played this.
but
You never
never
played this
in
game?
numbers. Then,
No.
instead of watching the show slowly swim away, they stayed. Those whales
I
stayed in
remember
that
when I
same
first
spot
said, when I
playing for
first saw
well
you.
over 20 minutes. It was the most incredible
What?
thing I've ever witnessed.
It looks like some knockoff Pokemon game or something.
When I was about 13, we had a ritual during
Okay.
the summer where we would hang out at my
No, that's not what I
buddy's
said. I
house
said, like,
and alternate
it looks
between
like the
hanging on his front
unwanted
porch
child.
and playing
The
Super Mario in
Pokemon.
his second floor bedroom.
You know what?
One day we were doing
That's
the same
fucked
old
up.
on the porch and decided to go
Oh,
and fire up the Nintendo. Good decision.
I thought I found a new place.
After about 10 minutes we heard a tremendous crash
Yeah, I
from
feel
the
stupid.
four-corner
I
stop
even
out
re-
front and the whole house shook. Being closest to the window,
Okay.
I looked out and saw
Like the moon, you are you're ignorant of the dawn. If there is one ardent wish that must be fulfilled, it will be when the 9 shadows are cast, woven together through 20 years of moonlit nights. Only then shall you understand the radiance of dawn.
We spent the next 4 hours trying to stop the bleeding with bed
Okay.
sheets and watched as paramedics tried in vain to get him out with the jaws of life until they finally lost him.
Bitch, I
can
be my
still
meat
picture
and
his
my
face
swag
to
is
this
so
day.
complete.
Poor
Get a
guy.
yellow
Edit.
bone,
Grandma.
ugly goggle
No,
on the feet,
I'm
and
sorry
I'm
you
always
had to go
getting.
through something
But I'm
like
still gonna
that.
be my. Vivian, pick up
I
other
live in
fighting games with me.
Philadelphia and
Come
I
on.
was walking
I'm
up
playing a
Cross
game
Second
right
one of the
now.
main thoroughfares
I'm
in
not
the
talking about
city
right
when
now.
all of a
I'm talking
sudden
about
I
in
hear
general.
sirens, which isn't that
You
unusual.
done playing
And
Smash?
I
You're
see a cop
competitive. I don't
racing
see why
down
you
the
play other
street,
fighting games.
which also isn't that
Because
unusual. But then I see a geep, oblivious to this cop, start to cross broad.
Dude, you could be
At
like the
about this
next Sonic
time I
Sonic.
got the oh
And
frick.
you won't be a
This is
furry.
going to end horrendously face and stop to watch.
You're really gonna say
Where are
that?
The Jeep
You're
gets
really gonna
about
say that?
halfway across the street.
Yeah.
These
with a
niggas
cop
are gonna jump
who's doing
me.
at
Oh
least
my god.
65-70.
Okay.
Come on, Vivian, be the next Sonic spot.
Goes airborne and flips end over end twice and
Or
then
can I just be
lands
the next
upside
Espion?
down. While the cop is flipping over, the Jeep is
Gotta
doing
be
a barrel
Sonic
roll,
Fox.
also airborne,
Next
but
Espion.
underneath the cop. And this is where it reaches the
They say the
point
next
once you
Espion
beat-
is
once you
better.
beat the
After
best,
the cop
once
lands,
you
the
beat
Jeep
the best,
freaking lands
then
on
you get
top
your
of
own
the
title.
cop, and it's
No.
like one giant pile of
I don't think
twisted
that's how it
metal,
works.
broken glass,
It does.
and shredded rubber. A few
That's
seconds
exactly how it
later,
works.
all of the other cops, who were racing to the same
Whatever.
crime scene as the first,
Look,
come
Look,
barreling
while
down
you're beating
broad.
everybody, right?
They all
Say you
screech
have to
to
beat
a
the jet, right?
halt,
They're gonna be like, oh,
jump
he's
out
the
of
next
their
Sonic
cars with
Fox,
their
right?
guns drawn
And then
as
you
if
beat
the
Sonic
driver
Fox,
of the
and they're like,
Jeep was
nah,
some
he's better than
mastermind
Sonic Fox.
terrorist bent
He's
on
him.
murdering the Philadelphia
He's
police
she.
force.
Bam.
I like to imagine that when you say
So
cop, you don't
you're
mean cop car,
misgendering
but
that.
an actual police officer. I'm picturing
I'm
I was
hanging out the
speaking in
phone.
like,
I'm hanging out
man
I was,
going at 70
oh,
miles
hey,
per hour and
hey,
T-boning
I was
a Jeep
speaking in like,
off a train.
go ahead.
A few years
Go ahead.
ago, I was in Boston
Okay.
visiting some friends and went outside
I was
to
speaking
smoke
in
a
like,
cigarette. I'm standing on the sidewalk.
I wasn't speaking
enjoying
towards you when I said
water
that though,
and
but
two
you know,
cars
I
screeched
understand.
to a
I
halt in
understand.
front
It's
of
okay.
me. Neither
Okay,
moved for a
I'm
minute,
joking.
and so I
Okay.
didn't think anything
yeah.
of it. Just odd. Then,
But
from
it's like,
seemingly out of
since,
nowhere,
since I'm talking
two
about you,
cops
they'll be like,
come running with
she's
the cars
better
with
than
their
him.
guns
She's
drawn.
hurt.
The cops were
See?
screaming, "Mother, let me see your hands. Don't move,
Come
you
on,
frick."
Vivian,
All
come the
kinds
next
of
Sonic Fox.
deliciously profane things to shout in the middle of the day in the middle of the city.
What
They
fighting
slapped the
game?
hood of the first car and yelled at
Honestly,
the
he
driver
plays
to
all
take
the
off
fighting
and then
games.
stood on opposite sides of the
Does
rear
he play
car,
Smash?
their guns aimed through the
No,
windows
he doesn't
and
play
still
Smash.
screaming.
Smash is a
A
party
few
game.
moments later, about 10 cop
Thanks.
cars pull up, lights and
It is.
sirens,
Thanks.
and cops start
It
piling up
is.
with their guns drawn.
Thanks.
A couple with shotguns that they
Black
racked
Ross
and
said
then
it
leveled
himself.
at the car. I was about 20 feet away,
The
but
frames
none
are
of them
dropping
seemed
like
to even notice.
you're nuts.
I wasn't told to back away or anything, as this
Oh,
is
then
happening.
like 3
A
times?
small
That's
crowd
nice.
was together. So, since I'm on the passenger side, I can't see the driver. The cops open the door on my side and pull out the passenger. He was a
Yeah.
normal-looking guy, white guy in t-shirt and jeans, and they lay him down on the road, cuff
Did you
him,
say
and
white?
take him off to the squad
That's a
car.
racist.
So far, pretty interesting.
You
Then they take the
racist,
driver out and lay him on the ground.
misogynistic,
But since he's on the other side of the car, I still can't see him.
transphobic.
Cops then start pulling things out of the car and putting them on the hood.
For Long
bottles
Beach
of
Griffey,
pills,
I don't
backpack,
care what you that
and then
man
a
to go.
gun. This is getting more interesting. Then,
That man's a
as
what?
we are all watching in rapt attention, this huge
Go.
cop, black, probably 6'5" and
What the
about
fuck in the
300
frames
pounds,
dropping?
reaches down to pick up the driver. He does so with one hand and we
It's
all
actually
stand
so
in
annoying.
amazement as we realize the driver is a midget and is dangling from the hands of this gigantic cop. The midget is screaming at the top
You
of
can't
his
say
lungs,
that.
"Frick you cops, blah blah blah," and the cop pretty much carries him one-handed to a squad car and throws him in the back. When the cruiser takes off there was a moment of silence and then everyone, probably 30 bystanders, a dozen cops, everyone starts laughing hysterically at the same time. I called every single person I knew, just so that I would not be accused of making it up. It was hands down the funniest thing I have seen. So many of these stories start when a person goes outside
Thing
for
I've
a
seen that
cigarette. I need to start smoking.
Smells like this guy in
My mom
Pokemon.
took me to get my hair cut at a salon when
That's
I
all.
was a 13-year-old boy. I usually get my hair cut at the barber, but we didn't have the time.
Got the flat
So,
top.
this petite gay guy is talking nice and cutting
It's
my
kind
hair.
of bald.
Next to me
You
is
have the
this
flat top.
14-year-old chick looking
I
kind
don't
of
even have a flat top.
She has two huge gay guys cutting her hair. I'm 6 feet 2 inches 240 pounds, and I was about that size when I was 13. These two guys were lisping and snipping at her long blonde hair with their tight black shirts and huge arms. 10 minutes into her haircut the guys cutting her hair start barking at each other that the other was cutting her hair wrong. These two huge gay guys start throwing fists and connecting with on each other's face. One stabs the other with a scissor in the arm.
Why'd that do so much?
Blood is everywhere. The petite gay guy cutting my hair gets between me and the brawl, gets some blood on him, and gets hit in the face. The fight gets broken up. The one guy goes to the hospital, and my haircut was free of charge. That was way more exciting than the barber. I used to do security and landed a gig at the Teen Choice Awards.
What did that do so
I
much? The
landed very
hell?
best position that night.
I'm trying to hit the story.
Guarding
Shut
some
up.
high-powered
What story?
confetti blowers right next
Oh.
to the stage. I was underneath the section of the stage that rose up.
I just
and
wanna
the
hear this part.
dancers stood. I saw every star from just a few feet away from them. Some older dude sitting near me kept turning around and later told me most of the girls here aren't wearing panties. I wasn't wearing my glasses so it was pointless for me to stare out into the crowd. I hear them announce Megan Fox coming up to present the next award and look upwards as she walks into position. She wasn't wearing panties. I never do. I am female.
Okay,
Another
that was
female
annoying.
friend and I went to pick up a guy we worked with to go play pool. When we got there he came out with another guy who he
I know people
introduced
decide
as
not to
Jack.
wear underwear in public.
Jack needed to stop at someone's house
I don't know, you
really
tell
quickly
me.
to pick something up. Sure, no problem. I didn't think
You tell me,
anything of
Mal.
it,
You
so
tell
we
me.
stop on the way
I
and
don't
make
do
sure
it.
that I pull
The only
over
time
on
I
the
don't wear
driveway and we
underwear
wait while Jack runs up to the front door
is,
of the house. Someone
like,
lets him in and a
not
few
like
minutes pass
subjective.
by. We sit there with the
I
radio
don't.
on making small talk. All of a sudden Jack comes flying out of the house, hops back into my car and yells floor IT. Before I can even think twice I see a big guy come running out of the house towards my car. I immediately throw the car in reverse, back down the driveway and onto the road. As soon as I put the car in drive and press the gas, big guy jumps on my hood and is glaring at me from a foot away through the windshield. He's screaming to stop the car, grabs an
Mom had ice cream too.
and slides off the car. I gun it, tearing down the street yelling at Jack what the FK. Big guy is chasing the car for 2 blocks until we lose him completely. It turns out, our guy friend was unaware of what Jack had planned, and didn't really know him that well to begin with. Jack had stolen a rather large amount of C from his dealer and put our lives in danger to pull it off. Never in my life had I ever been in shady situation like that, and all of a sudden I was the driver of a getaway car. I've never
What type of ice
been
cream
so
is it?
scared in my life.
Fudge.
Jack didn't
Bullshit.
seem to give a crap
Ew,
about
what
any
the
of it, and seemed apathetic when we dropped him off at a gas station and sped off. Our guy friend cut ties with him soon after.
Yeah?
I
Hey,
know this
Brianna,
will
how you
probably
doing?
sound
Hey,
like a
Brianna,
lot,
how you
but-
doing?
Shut up!
But what the heck? When I was in Iraq, we were on patrol in this city in northern-ish part of Iraq. We were ordered to get out and go on foot to secure some buildings. I got caught up talking to our
You're
sergeant.
annoying. You're
I'm
actually
not sure
annoying.
how much time went by, but out of
You're
nowhere,
so annoying.
I
It's not
heard
even
a
funny.
Can they hear me? Can they hear me?
Someone
Yes.
device, or it was remotely detonated. I turned around and see bodies falling all around. Everything seemed like it went in slow motion. If you can remember
Maybe
it,
you're
it's
just
in
lucky,
Part
okay?
1, when Tom Hanks storms the beach. and his ears are ringing and he can't hear anything. That's what it felt like. 4 of my fellow Marines were laying on the ground crying in pain.
I'm doing fine.
Yes, Marines cry.
Hey, Brianna.
Shut up, Mel. Oh my god.
So much screaming and yelling.
Stop copying
So
me.
much awful stuff over there. I never even told my
I will stop
parents
copying you
friends
to you,
about
man.
this
That's how you
storm.
sound.
It sickens me.
Oh my god, I did so
A
much.
football game in Columbus 2005/2006. I forget. After the Bucks won, I stepped onto the porch with a few friends to
I should
have a
use
smoke.
headbutt.
What's the
As
applesauce?
soon as I get
A supply
outside, it
sauce,
smells
and
like
I don't know.
smoke. Sure enough, there is a 7-foot
I haven't
stack
heard
of
of
prop
the
furniture on fire right in front
What's
of the
apply
house
sauce?
I was at in the middle of the
Yes, I
road.
said apply
The
sauce.
Hey,
fire
apply
really
sauce.
begins to grow as dozens of people are
Apply
continuing
sauce.
to toss more and more couches and chairs onto this
It
inferno.
was so
Now
funny.
keep in mind, all of this takes place in a little under 1 minute.
It was so
Out
funny.
of nowhere, a city snow plow comes flying
Hey,
out of the
baby.
alleyway and crushes the whole pile down to nothing and scatters it all over the road and alley.
Okay,
Cheers
we all
erupt
do.
from all the neighboring houses at the scene.
I'm not doing
Nothing
anything for
hysteria
Mother's
is going
Day.
on around them. All of a sudden, a huge beam of light shines
I
down
told her
right
mom
onto the
happy
street,
Mother's Day,
followed
and
by
then
another
Vivian
as
told
2
me
police
I'm a
helicopters
useless
swoops
sibling,
across the
and she
area.
hates me.
Then
And
almost
she's gonna drown me
immediately
when
after
she
all
sees
of
me.
this crap is going down, a wall of police
True
on
story.
horseback arrive.
Shut up.
I mean, these M-owned the streets
Olivia.
and walk the sidewalk.
And all
Buttons in hand.
Why does my voice sound
Just
so
swatting
bad?
at anyone stupid enough to get
Why your
in
voice
their
sounds so
way.
what?
They marched right down
Sounds so
the
bad.
street
You can
and
hear your
usually when I
voice?
sing,
in less than
usually
1
like when I
minute.
joke,
No one
yeah,
was
usually
injured.
when I joke with you,
Best thing I've ever seen.
and I
This
sing,
bursted
it
his
doesn't sound
awesome
like that. It
mistake.
feels congested.
Are you sick or something? You have allergies?
Someone committing an act
I
of
don't have
douche-bagery.
allergies, to my
Your
knowledge.
immediate reaction is wishing they get
Brianna, what are you
exactly
doing
what
for your Mother's Day?
Well, one night I was sitting on a bench outside a train station, and I can hear this
She's
guy
in college.
driving
She
like
has
a
like
real
a
gentleman.
How do you know that?
I
You
can't
stalking
see
her or
him yet,
something?
but I can tell
Maybe.
from the sounds
You
that
stalking her?
I'm
Brianna, he's stalking
Maybe.
you.
public street next to the building.
How can I
I
stalk
say to
someone when I don't
myself,
live in the
I
same
hope
state
that
as them?
butthole
Let's be
gets
honest.
his car.
Let's be honest,
And
shit.
as soon as I get
You
out
literally
of
just
the
said
car,
me. Okay.
I look up and see him come screaming around the
It's
side
called
of the
a
building
joke,
and slam
alright?
his car
Learn to
head
take
into
it,
a
alright?
telephone
Yeah,
pole.
learn how to take
It
this.
wasn't particularly
Anyway.
crazy by
I mean, you
conventional
clearly can't
standards,
take
but
it,
the
so
timing
you
of it
know
was
someone
just
has to.
insane.
That's all I'm saying.
I've seen a camel get so
I can take a
angry that
joke.
it threw up its
You
own
can't take a
stomach.
joke
Oh, but
because you end up hanging on the phone.
The time I was
Okay,
cave
Chief.
diving and I
Okay.
came around a corner only to end up face to face with a shark.
Because
It
my
was
mom
just hanging
is
out and
sad.
we scared the
Doesn't want to
crap
do
out of
anything.
each other. A third was the time we came upon a pod of dolphins that took shelter from a recent storm in a cove. There were about
And you're still
60 of
typing,
them.
even though I
I
already
put on my
explained it.
fins and swam with
Okay.
the dolphins as long as they let
That
me.
that
I
freaking
knew I had to stop
what's it
when one of
called?
the larger
Zangoose took
males
out like
very
half my
suddenly
team. I'm
darted
mad.
towards me and blocked my path. Disclaimer.
Mel,
I live in an old
please.
farmhouse. So, I was lying on my couch surfing the internet on my laptop when something tickled the
I'm
right
tired of
side
going to
of
this
my
damn
neck.
tower.
I batted it
I feel
away,
full of energy.
thinking it was just
I
a
usually don't feel
fly,
like.
but I saw something sort of move away out of the corner of my eye. I turned
I
to
definitely
look.
need heal.
Saw
Oh my
nothing
god.
unusual. I went back to perusing the internet for a moment.
Mel's a Sith Lord.
Then
What
looked
you
over
mean?
my other shoulder. Crawling out from under the pillow my head was on was the scaly body of a fairly large snake.
Dude, you
In
got
an
a
instant,
bike
I
and it's not
realized
just
that the snake was under the pillow.
You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna
Being
start
the snake
purifying some of
tasted
these
me.
Pokemon.
Much leaping about and screaming ensued.
Your clothes.
Sure enough, it was a 5-foot-long black snake, which at least is harmless. It was wrapped around my head, in my living room, on my couch. What
Yeah, I
freaked me
told her
out
that and
most
she's
was
still not
that I
happy.
never even heard it moving.
I didn't even.
Never even felt
Stop
it
bullying.
sneaking under my pillow. It
Mel was
days
bullying my
before I
mom
could
today.
sit on that couch again.
I really did.
I kept
Only
seeing
bullied-
that snake
only
under
bullied
my
one.
pillow. Our pet turkey.
I
who
don't
we
bully
kept on
any
the
of your
roof
friends,
of
actually.
our
You're bullying my
apartment
mom. You
complex.
bully
This was
Brianna
in
by saying you're gonna
Mexico.
stalk
I didn't bully
her.
Brianna.
Yes, you
Jehovah's
did.
Witnesses came knocking on our door.
Brianna knows like
I had
I'm
an
joking. I
apartment
do
in
that, like,
downtown
half the time,
Denver
you know.
that had a spectacular view
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
bunch
yeah.
of crazy crap.
She
It
never
was
told
the
me to
third
stop.
floor on a corner of a 3-lane one-way.
Pretty sure
There were
he's
rats
a
on a
wolf.
weekly basis, and we just got used to keeping
Oh.
binoculars handy
I
as
think
soon
she's
as
a
we
woman.
heard
I'm not
cars
sure.
screeching.
Yes,
Anyway,
Brianna's a
but yeah,
woman. Damn.
Prostitution, drugs,
Yeah.
muggings. In the
Anyway,
2
but-
The name
years
Brianna?
I
Like,
got
we-
attacked twice.
I mean,
we also kept a
there's
bunch
males
of
out here
weapons
named
by the
Hinata,
front
so,
door
you know, you
just
never
in
know.
case.
You said
The order
Hinata?
of death included
Yeah.
nunchucks. Police
You said it was a
crafted
gender
golf
neutral
club
name,
left
though.
behind when a guy got caught
I
trying
think
to
it is.
steal my car. So one time
There's-
I
there's
heard a
girls
dog
out here
yelling
named,
coming from the street. Get
Ryan.
on the freaking ground right now.
Yeah.
I'm giving you to the
There's
count
another
of
name.
3.
I was trying
At
to.
least 8 cop cars have converged on a bunch of gang members from both sides of the streets. There was about a dozen black guys in the center of the street and cops
Exactly.
rocking
Brianna's not
around
gender
with their
neutral.
guns drawn.
Ryan is
There was
gender.
half-tailed
Gender.
beef
Ah.
until the right
you
moment.
never know
One
nowadays.
side of the
Parents
street
are
had
like
tall buildings, the
off
other
the
a
wall
school
with
with a
things.
tall fence, so they were stuck.
Yeah,
But it was
they
yelling.
rename it
Most
Una
of the gang
Pishkin
had their hands up and looked like they
for
were
the
giving
children.
up. Then one of them ran. A fat, slow-moving one too. This was the mid-90s and I don't think tasers were common then. A bunch of SWAT-type cops tackled him and beat the crap out of him. They were wailing on him with sticks from all sides. Several of the SWAT guys stayed on him.
Who's Olivia Mel?
I could see his head lifting
Who's
off
Olivia
the
Mel?
ground a few times.
It's a
with
song.
I know it's a
gun.
song, but who's Olivia?
He was still alive. His
know.
friends went right
I'm
to the
lonely
ground
out
after
here.
that. I saw them all.
I feel like you're
get tough,
lying.
so they stayed on the ground.
I really
The
am.
officers would go one at a time a search there.
I'm lonely out here,
Everything
even though I have like
but
8
the
hoes.
baggies on the hood and trunk of a car.
I was like 0.
The street was blocked off for almost
Mel
2
got
hours.
hoes.
The one that
I
ran
don't.
was hauled away in an ambulance. The rest were taken away
I wish I
individually in
did, but
police
I don't.
cars. You want to know when something really big has gone down? The police keep high-fiving each other during the bust. I have seen 4 of Jupiter's moons. I look at them frequently with my cheap $15 telescope, Galileoscope. It's the most incredible sight the universe has to offer at such a cheap price. I witnessed a guy on a sport bike approach an intersection with a red light.
Oh my god,
As he
move,
got
ho.
close, the light turned green and he guided through the intersection, probably peaking at about 50 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Only problem was a truck decided to run the red light and the biker T-boned the
My
truck
stomach
right in
hurt.
front of the rear
My
axle.
stomach hurt.
The bike stopped immediately and the rider went airborne. He traveled about
So,
20
what are you gonna
30
do?
feet in the air before hitting the ground and tumbling another 15-20 feet. The only piece of gear he
So what
was
are we gonna
wearing
do?
was a helmet, but it didn't save him. When he hit the truck, his helmet was ejected from his head and he landed head first.
That's my brother who's slamming shit in the
According to
microwave.
paramedics, the rider died on impact with the ground. It was a very gruesome sight, and because of
I'm not gonna lie, I do the
lights
same
checked for
shit.
cross traffic when approaching.
So,
a red
what the
light,
fuck?
biker did. Hitting an intersection at a high speed just as your light turns green is not a smart idea. But the guy in the truck should not have
have to go to,
run
like,
the light either.
the hideout?
The worst
Hold
part
up.
was that I saw the whole thing coming. From the biker coming up from behind me to the guy running the light, and there was nothing I could do to warn the guy on the bike. An excessive amount of people in my town whine about how the city is moving to roundabouts at appropriate intersections.
Yes, the
Mainly
microwave's being
highways and the
abused.
in
It
addition to
it heats up our food for
more
free without getting
efficiency and
paid.
traffic, they reduce fatal
That's basically
accidents by
slavery.
90%. Love it. I was awakened
Like how
one
you're
morning by
we're a
the sound
slave
of
to
a
our
number
device.
of
I mean,
lights
electronics
flying
are like
airplanes over my home. I looked outside
slaves
and
to us.
saw a bunch of planes overhead and people
Robots are gonna
running
take over this
flying
world
all
one day.
over the place. I went outside and some other kids
Electronic
yelled at me
Protective
to follow
Services.
them. We climbed the fire
EPS
escape to the roof of the
EPS.
tallest building in our neighborhood, where we saw the planes flying over Pearl Harbor and seeing Pearl in flames. Then a loud explosion.
Mel, how would you feel
broke
if you're a
out
slave to
with the guns
robots?
from Pearl Harbor firing at the planes struck
I
the
broke
building
my
in the
leg.
next
You're
bomb.
disgusting.
The 7th of December,
I really am.
1941.
Pipe it
60 years
up,
later,
pipe it
I
up,
heard a loud
pipe it up, pipe it
explosion
up.
outside
Okay.
my
That's
office
exactly what
window
I'm
in
gonna
Pentagon City, Virginia. Looked out the window
I have
and
no
saw
idea
the
where to
Pentagon
go.
in
Hold up.
flames. You need to move to the middle of nowhere.
I need.
About
like
10
that.
years ago, I worked in downtown
I doubt it.
Albany, NY. I was out having a cigarette at about 8 a.m. on a spring sun morning. I'm just all looking around, enjoying the quiet of a weekend morning in this pseudo city. All of a sudden, my left eye detects movement, and I turned
My
head
left
just into
foot.
to see an attorney complete his 30-story journey to the sidewalk. I mean, splat, and only about
Mel
10
has 2
feet
left
away
feet.
from me. I was horror-struck, ran in and called
Yeah,
the police, and
I'm a
didn't
third
even
one.
go back outside
Oh,
until
God.
after they left. I do remember peeking out of the front window just to see what was going on. I saw something that forever
disgusting.
changed me. A firefighter was washing the guts of the former attorney down the sewage drain, and when
There's
he
somewhere
got
where
to
I'm
a
about to
piece
go.
of the skull that would not fit, he walked over and kicked it in. He kicked part of former Mr. Attorney's skull down the sewer. My realization that morning: we are all just disposable.
I have no idea
Hardly
where to
any one
go.
person is truly important at all. So the only true reward in life
I'm
is
gonna
to
cheat.
surround yourself with people who care about you, cause everyone else will kick your skull down the fricking drain. Coincidental side note: I am now married to an attorney. We were dating at the time when this actually happened. It almost put her off law school, but we figured the guy was just some poor soul. Palm to head. I only have one eye and a fake eye. I may not be able to participate. Well, the craziest thing that you saw with 2 eyes probably caused you to have 1 eye. When I was about 9, I convinced my mom to take me to Blockbuster to rent a movie on a Friday afternoon. She opened the front door of the house. We both stepped outside, and an FBI agent taking cover behind the tree in our front yard told us curtly that everything was going to be okay, but we should go back inside. Turned out a guy living at the other end of the street pulled a gun on a kid playing in his front yard, took 2 shots and missed both before the kid got to his house. It wasn't the FBI. When in Michigan when I was little, we saw a lightning storm at night on the beach. The whole sky was lit up, and the lightning was practically
What does that
continuous for
smell?
minutes on end. There was no wind, only the greatest fireworks display I have ever seen.
Is that popcorn?
That's what happens up here in Michigan. That, and winters that stop for a day or two before coming back in full force. I've seen so many freak things.
I have no
One
idea
that
where to go.
immediately stands out is once years ago now, I went to a Deftones show in RI. There were about 2,000 people there. After the show ended, a full-fledged riot broke out, over what I have no clue. I mean, balls out fighting in the middle of the street. It was smack dab in at the entrance exit. It was almost impossible not to be involved if you were unlucky enough to have already exited the building. Of course I was outside, ducking, dodging and running. That's when the police riot squad busted through the crowd on horses. Let me tell you, seeing 5 mounted police run straight through a crowd on huge freaking horses is impressive. I mean, if you were unlucky enough to be in the horse's path, you were set flying through the air. It was scary as crap but freaking impressive as heck. The riot subsided in minutes and the police pushed everyone back when backups came in. I'd be that Peter if I had to see the Deftones.
Yo, I really don't know where to go.
No. Blackpool Pleasure Beach is a theme park in England. It's literally meters away from the sea and there's a ton of rides, which back in the day, included the biggest roller coaster in the UK. When I was 7 my parents took me there for a day out. We were just about at the entrance of the theme park as the screaming started. A fighter jet flew literally meters over this huge roller coaster I had been dying to see. The whole plane seemed to be on fire, with a lot of smoke coming out of the engines. Luckily enough, the tide was out, so when the pilots ejected, they landed on the beach and the jet continued further out into the bay. It's still one of my most vivid memories.
I'll
I can
finish
still
you.
remember the sound of the impact, the fireball and the incredibly pungent smell of jet fuel. The police ambulance sirens kicked in almost instantly. I think I heard later that the pilots knew they were in trouble and headed towards the beach. They suffered a few broken bones, but thankfully there were no fatalities. It was one of the most surreal moments that I've ever experienced. Standing on the corner of my street, watching the Twin Towers collapse. After helping clean up my great uncle's house, it was getting dark, so I was leaving and shut all the lights off and headed towards the front door. For some reason I got the urge to say goodbye Uncle Fred out loud, so I did. Suddenly the entryway lights flicked on and the stereo in the entryway turned on as I was passing them, and the stereo started playing music like some kind of message from beyond the grave. Completely freaked me the frick out. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be a ghost after all. One of the lights I turned off actually turned on that section of the house, which took about 45 seconds to start up for some reason. Old house, old wiring. I was able to replicate the results repeatedly, used said information to scare the heck out of family members, and of course whenever I tell the story I don't mention the last part about figuring it out. Uncle Bill used to live next door to us when I was about 13. He was about 60, retired and lived with his wife. Really nice guy. Our family would go out on his boat once in a while, Christmas drinks with him, etc., etc. This went on for a few years, so we knew him pretty well. One day I'm sitting at home when a police SWAT team come down our side passage and motion me to move back inside. Out back, we live on a canal. A police boat has turned up. Bit of chaos ensues, yelling next door, etc., etc. Turns out Uncle Bill had been robbing armored trucks for years, along with his son-in-law. They stole millions and he was one of Australia's most wanted. I still say he was quite a nice guy, even though he'd been dousing one armored truck driver with petrol and threatening the other driver that his partner would be set on fire. I'd never have picked him, and I've known a lot of dodgy characters. In 2001 I was almost blown up by an IRA car bomb. The back of the boat, trunk, exploded open and loads of smoke started pouring out. It turned out only the detonator went off, and the 88 pounds of high explosives remained intact.
Oh, I know
If
where
it
to go
wasn't
now.
for poor Irish workmanship, I wouldn't be here today. I can link to some news reports if anyone is interested.
I figured it out. Fuck.
You've been visited
Enter
by
the whole
dog.
tournament for no
He's a
reason.
regular dog, but he's a good boy. If you comment pet, he'll let you pet him. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people. Hotel maids of Reddit. What is the weirdest or most disgusting activity you have walked in on while you were about to clean the room? NSW. I was room service for a few years. I served a 50-60-year-old French-Canadian dude who was in nothing but short shorts with a 18-ish-year-old Asian boy in full scuba gear on the bed. 18. I was really not prepared to learn how many people smear their crap all over hotel rooms. I'm starting to think I'm the weird one for pooping in the toilet. Front desk here, working right now. Hell, we have had many
Wait, what'd he
shenanigans
say?
happen. A very nice businessman with a briefcase checked into a room. Really a very nice person. Didn't hear much from him all night other than him asking where the liquor store was. Upon morning, he had checked out and left without talking to the desk. Not uncommon. When the maid went in to clean the room, she found quite the surplus. Apparently this man had a mild case of alcoholism. He had bought 2 bottles of booze and proceeded to drink it all, as well as spill some onto the phone, puke all over, and the worst, crap everywhere. In the bed, on the floor, in the tub, on the shower curtain,
What if they not
all
do
over
anything?
the toilet, and tried to clean his mess up with all the towels. Needless to say, we have his name hanging up on the list of people who cannot rent a room. I used to be a night auditor and I have my own stories as that, but the one housekeeping story I always remember was when I was coming off shift one morning after covering a few extra hours for the day shift when one of the new housekeepers grabbed the desk and said someone was being attacked on the 3rd floor. So I grabbed my manager's keys and headed upstairs and was barely off the elevator when I heard what was very much not someone being attacked. She was screaming her head off though, and he sounded like he was obliging
I'm
her
calling
repeated requests
electronic
for her to have
protection.
her. A few guests were standing around the hallways listening. Most found it funny, but I radioed the front desk to accidentally give the room a wake-up call.
Unseasoned water.
Down. Poor housekeeper was sitting in back shaking because she thought someone was being murdered.
Boneless milk.
This now explains that phone ringing in the last Brazzers clip I watched.
You share your boneless milk.
Stag party, bachelor party, was staying at the hotel I work in, and they got ridiculously drunk one night before retiring to their rooms. The next day after they checked out, we
Oh my god, these baby Pokemon are bodying us.
the foulest smell I've ever experienced. Upon entering, we discovered that the 2 guys sharing one room had not only vomited, but had crap everywhere in this room. All over the beds, the floor, in the bin. Some of it was even smeared up the walls. I can only imagine that they were so intoxicated that they lost all control of their bodily functions. No wonder they checked out so hastily. In conclusion, that room had to be completely refurbished. New beds, new carpet, new paint on the walls. It was weeks before it was usable again.
Weak sauce.
Needless to say, the culprits were contacted and made to pay the cost of damages as they'd obviously tried to escape without blame. You know, I'm starting to feel less guilty about leaving the quilt folded but on the floor. Never any activity in progress, but I've definitely cleaned up the aftermaths of very interesting activities. There was the poop room. A young couple with 2 babies leaves after 3 days. I walk into a shitstorm of actual crap. Poop on the walls, poop on the carpet, poop on the sheets, poop on the towels, poop as far as the eye could see. No tip. I literally shed tears of self-pity as I cleaned up the remnants. Another good one was what could only be assumed was a bachelorette party that left me a bit of an gift, an intricate, free-floating web of yarn intertwined with at least a full deck of playing cards featuring 1970s P-stars hung, no pun intended, majestically from where the curtains once were. The worst part was that my supervisor made me take it to the lost and found, where I was forced to come up with a description of the item. I went with hanging pornography mobile, while blushing and giggling hysterically. Well, I work the front desk at the hotel. but my friend who I used to work with was the houseman and he told me this story once. So it was checkout day for this room, and if the guest haven't come to the front desk by 11:30 am, checkout is 11 am, then we call the rooms. This particular room didn't pick up the phone when we called from the front desk, which isn't that unusual as sometimes people just leave the hotel without checking out. Anyway, my friend, the houseman, goes up to check that the room is clear empty, but he can't open the room with his master swipe key. It was dead bolted from the inside. So we get the all clear from management to open the door and get maintenance to open it with their override keys. The houseman walks in to find the woman still in bed asleep. He says, "Mom, it's time to wake up," and touches her leg. Stone cold, rigor mortis. TL. DR. My friend touched a cold dead body because he thought they were asleep. I'm a 4th generation Alberta oil field worker and my dad told me a story about a frack crew in an Alberta hotel. I don't know if you guys know, but a frack crew is a large group of men, sometimes women, but not many, between 20 and 50 guys, and they vary in age from 18 to their mid-50s. The crew decided that for some reason, this was the perfect night to get absolutely hammered drunk and freak up some crap. They had multiple complaints, and when the front desk staff finally sent up the cops to start kicking asses out, they discovered that the large and very inebriated group had decided that they wanted to party together. But the single room was too small, so they had smashed the wall out between 2 rooms. I'm assuming that those who participated no longer had careers as frackers with that particular company. I had a guy from Alberta come into the adult shop I work at in BC and say he wanted to order 50 fleshlights to sell up in camp for quadruple what he paid. I really thought this was where this story was going. Former F&B manager, front desk manager and catering manager at different times. While working the desk one morning, a housekeeper came up to the front desk, pale as all heck, shaking, saying we needed to call the police. Apparently, a young woman checked in around 2 am the night before and performed, or attempted to perform, a self-abortion. There was blood all over the bed, carpet, chair, walls, door, bathtub. Looked like a murder scene. We originally thought that's what happened, but the investigation revealed what happened. Horrific. A guy I worked with told a story of how he got called to a room back when doors had round doorknobs. He couldn't open the door because the guy inside the room kept screaming when anyone attempted to enter. Turns out, the guy on the inside had the doorknob up his ass and it was stuck. My mom worked in her family's boarding house in the early 1950s. She went up to clean a room that had been inhabited by a few recently discharged servicemen. One of the guys apparently snored so loudly that to get revenge, his buddies left without waking him. My mom went up and threw back the covers to find the offending snorer, buck naked and sound asleep. She screamed. He woke up, and in his words fell in love with her that very moment. And that's how my dad met my mom. They had to date on the sly because her parents didn't take too kindly to their 16-year-old daughter finding a naked man up in one of the rooms. So, my dad's buddy, my Uncle Pat, would pick my mom up for a date, take her to my dad. They would then go on a date, and then Uncle Pat would meet up with them and take my mom home. This lasted until somebody got somebody preggers. TL. Doctor, my mom finds my dad naked in room, marries him. As I sit here, I am going through a box of old photos with tears welling up in my eyes. Yeah, I'm sentimental as frick. My big boy cat Bub Jenkins keeps nudging me with his big boy cat head and purring the way he always does when I'm emotional. Tonight's been a good night. I've heard of the show How I Met Your Mother but have never watched it. I'm thinking this naked man works 2/3 times. Must be from the show. Can someone explain please? Ah, a love story. So refreshing in amongst all these poop nightmares. As a housekeeping supervisor, I didn't observe anything too extreme, but why do people have to do weird crap with their crap? I have never had a problem missing the toilet or crapping the bed my whole life, and these people do it during a quick stay at a hotel. One time in particular it appeared someone did some fecal finger painting all over the bathroom. It looked like someone murdered a chocolate Easter bunny. One of my friends who studied psychology said that there are people that do it for physical gratification, but that a lot of the time people go through this weirdly specific kind of breakdown where they feel powerless for whatever reason, and to gain control again they smear crap everywhere. Evidently it happens pretty often to otherwise normal healthy people. I used to work as a housekeeper in a hotel with themed fantasialites. We had an underwater room, an igloo room, even a space themed room with a spaceship bed. This particular room was the jungle themed room, complete with a king size swinging bed. We always knock a few times and announce we're entering through an open crack in the door, but I suppose the occupants of the room couldn't hear me over their fricking times. I know walking in on people fricking is maybe more common or the weirdest or most disgusting, but these two happen to be around 500 pounds each. Slow motion, swinging, sweaty, loud, gelatinous pounding. They didn't see me walk in, but I still yelled out sorry unnecessarily and awkwardly loud and slammed the door. This hotel was in southeastern Wisconsin. I worked there about 10 years ago and it's since been closed. My mom used to be a hotel maid. She told me a story of how she went into a room. There was no do not disturb danger, and walked in on two men fricking. Nothing weird really, just that this was the 70s and my mom was new to the country and she'd never seen two men together before, so she was in shock and just stood there, wide-eyed and staring. The men shouted for her to get out and she apologized profusely. She felt bad but they didn't have a sign. I like the sheer curiosity factor in this anecdote. Most disgusting. Somebody had wiped his feces on the sheets. Totally disgusting. Luckily lovely older colleague with me took one look and said you take the next one. You're too young for this crap. I was 15. The most weird has to be the bloke who holed up in his room for 10-12 days, asked for extra blankets, which he used as blackouts over the curtains, and constantly asked at the bar for lemons. Only came out at night really, when he'd order 10 plus soft drinks from the bar, dip each cig from a pack of 20 in them, then line up the soggy cigs. Breakfast order was 12 hard-boiled eggs. Then when he'd venture out, in daylight, he'd take the time to rearrange the shelves in the local shop. Strange man. Found a plate full of lemons, sliced, with the steak knife, on top of a wardrobe when cleaning after him. Strange, spooky man. Oh yeah, he also wore only black. Big coat, hat, scarf draped over hat. During the hottest summer to date, it was bloody warm. Time traveler. Not a hotel, but a true cleaning story just the same. I worked for a cleaning company when I was in high school. We got an emergency call to clean up a private residence. I was the only one who could go. The folks had a Great Dane. They also had a gallon of peanut oil. The dog knocked the peanut oil over and it spilled everywhere. Then, being an opportunist, the dog lapped up all of it he could. I imagine the real issue started a couple of hours later. As the dog began getting the runs, it evidently scared him. He must have sprinted throughout the house with the oily runs chasing him as he fled. There was even a trail across their long mahogany dining table. TLDR. Shitstorm. I'm cracking up at the thought of this big dumb dog galloping through the house bewildered by his own spewing butthole. Laundry assistant housekeeper for a nursing home here. Walked in on a couple residents masturbating throughout the years. This year I walked into the room of one of our nastier residents and found him with his pants down and he had fricking maggots crawling all over his junk. Apparently he'd refused to shower for several weeks, if not longer. He's been sent to another facility. Till that hotel rooms are vile and disgusting and that I should never stay in one. Not me, but a friend. He worked maintenance and got a call to fix a broken door latch. As he approached the room, a 13-year-old girl comes storming out, yelling at her parents that she wasn't watching this again. Girl lets my friend in the room. Then crap gets real. The girl's mom and dad are 250 and 300 pounds, respectively. Friend says he's there to work on the door. Both parents are laying underneath the
Finally, I
covers in bed,
know where to
which is nothing
go.
that
Oh my
odd.
god,
They
it
tell
took
my
forever.
friend to get to work, and as he starts pulling out his tools, both parents get out of bed. They're completely naked, and proceed to start porking doggy style on the end of the bed. My friend says he'll just come back. The dad screams for him to keep working as he loudly plows his wife. Friend can
What the
hardly work
fuck?
because he's so shaken up. He never looks back, except for one time on his way out the door. When he sees that the dad was so fat, he laid his belly up on top of his wife's back, and had a chocolate milk in his hand. And had a chocolate milk in his hand. Maybe he knows
That's
something
Mel
I
in
don't.
20 years.
Okay, not a mate, but I was a front desk worker who had to go to rooms after everyone else left. So this old guy who just checked in with his old ether bag wife called up and said something along the lines of, hey, we were told that you could hook up a DVD player and it's not working. You had better fix it. So I went up there and there he was shirtless.
Brianna, you don't like
short
chocolate
shorts,
milk?
and his wife is obviously
Me
topless
neither.
with a
It's
sheet
too
covering
thick.
while smoking and pouring vodka into wine glasses. So nervously I
Okay,
attached the
nobody was
DVD player
thinking about
and
that.
it's a porno DVD already.
Nobody was thinking about that.
Husband says thank you over eagerly
Chocolate
while
milk's
touching my
alright.
shoulder. To make it worse, I heard the old leather bag say, I wonder what time his shift ends. Maybe we could invite
Oh, you
him
just
on
don't like milk in
the way back
general.
to the front counter and we'll
So how do you
I
eat
mean,
cereal
I
with
don't
water?
drink milk anymore. I used to.
I was a room service dude for a few years.
Are you the person that
A lady
eats
had
their
a
cereal with
miscarriage in her
water?
bed and cuddled the photos for a few days.
I was talking to you.
That was pretty messy. That's damn. I've been a housekeeper.
I had
for
a
a
whole
few
bowl
years
of cereal
now.
right now.
I only have a few notable
I bet you put the
but
water
I
in
work at a pretty high scale.
But isn't that a
so
form of
that
milk
may be
though?
a factor. One
Almond
of my
milk?
first rooms ever I will forever
Almond milk is
refer
pretty
to as the consummation room.
But it's a form
It
of
was
milk.
Take
one of
almond
our
milk?
suites.
Yes.
And first walking
Not
into
really.
it, there were hundreds of fake rose petals all over the floor.
It has milk in the
Wine and
name.
2 used glasses. Nothing crazy. My co-worker told me
Then
she
why they
had
call it
a
almond
living
milk?
room
Why can't it be
and I
called
should
something
strip
else if
and
it's not
make up a
milk?
bed. I walk in the bedroom and there's a few more wine glasses, a nice amount of condom wrappers on the floor, whatever. But the bed, I lifted the top comforter only to witness the grossest swamp of hymen ruination and girl juice ever. It had seeped like crazy to the outer edge
Flinch,
of the
flinch.
bed, leaked through the sheets into the
Damn.
mattress. The first thought I had was, perverted as it was, well, she must have been a squirter. Another time
But
a bad
why?
guy was making a bed for invited me to his room for drinks and a good time.
Can it be like
I made
pseudo
sure not
cheese?
to bend over at all while putting his towels away. I can't
Or
say
pea
I walked
cheese?
into anything too weird though. Generally people do a good job of covering up their nastiness until they are on their merry way out the door. Not really walked in on, but one of the strangest thing I've ever experienced. I work in small hotel bar in the middle of rural Alberta. The staff here are pretty close and we all know each other. One morning in the fall, one of the staff found a box outside one of the hotel side door exits.
The
Salted butter filled
pseudo-legendaries.
with fresh organs. Needless to say, he was shocked by it, but not to worry. Being a hunter, he knew it was not human. He went to the front desk to announce his odd and disturbing findings. Confusion spreads. About an hour or so later, questions were answered and then more questions were asked. The chambermaids found the source. In one of the rooms had blood covering the bathroom tile in various areas. The guest had somehow killed a deer, brought it into the hotel side door and butchered it in the room. TLDR, panic in hotel. Only one life lost. I've seen a lot of posts on here about period
Yeah, I can't
freaking
catch
or
it.
poop ruining sheets and towels, and how they just threw it all out. Don't these people get charged for that? I mean, every hotel I've been to has required a credit card on file before I got the room. Serious question. This is why they take the credit card.
I'm targeting the
out,
lumbre because the
even
lumbre
if you
can't do
pay
shit.
cash, or at least the smart ones do. I walked in a couple freaking once. No biggie, right? Didn't scream. Just blushed slightly and beat a hasty retreat. They left the hotel at 1 p.m. Half an hour before my
I was
shift
eating some
ended.
Captain Crunch.
So I was in a rush to get the room done so I could go home. I figured it wouldn't take me long. I was wrong.
I
Two
muted the
words
mic.
for you. Period
I was
freaking.
feeling hungry, but I
Let me
think
add here that I'm not opposed
my
to the
stomach got
idea
upset
of
by
period
it.
freaking
You're
in principle.
bad.
What I'm opposed to is cleaning up after someone else's period freaking. They'd put down towels to save the
This
sheets.
was
Captain Crunch
berries.
was a trash cereal.
But
That's
they
all I
used
went.
the hotel's towel.
You said Captain Crunch is a trash cereal.
In the end.
Yeah, I'm tired.
The towel wasn't
Trash.
big enough though.
Trash.
Obviously, since the sheets were
My mom bought like
blood-stained
3 boxes
and
of
the comforter,
Captain Crunch.
which
My
stayed
mom,
hidden
they
in
used
the
to buy that
wardrobe.
like every time I
kind
ran
of
out silver.
thought
That's
that a
all they
murder
used to
had
buy.
occurred
I'm
at
sick
this
of it.
point, since there was blood
Sick of
everywhere. Because the bathroom, which was overflowing with used tampons, confirmed my initial suspicions. They didn't bother to use the sanitary bags provided. A quick aside. Note to any ladies reading this, if sanitary bags are provided,
You would just owe me for a
it's a health
fucking
hazard to
brand
just leave
type of
bloody
cereal.
tampons in a bin.
You're mean.
Anyway, I didn't finish my
So
shift until
Brianna.
2:30 p.m.
She
It
said,
was a
what type of
caper.
cereal?
She said if
Since
you
I
dis-
wasn't
if
really
it,
in
I,
the mood
she
for
said she would
lunch
have disowned
anyway.
me if it was
Just a
without
thought
berries.
for everyone. When you use a hotel towel, just think.
I'm calling the
This
police
could be
on
a period
Brianna.
freaking towel that was washed
What
instead
if it
of
was just
thrown
berries?
away.
Exactly.
Did this job for a
What
while.
if it was only
Worst
berries?
job
No,
I ever had.
no cat.
So much flamanges in the showers.
No
Every
cat
single
just
day.
berries.
Like not just one gross person but multiple gross people. Every goddamn day. Also really badly blood-stained sheets. I just hope that it was
Teddy, yours is in the
superior
middle.
fricking and not some horrifically violent physical shaming and tried not to think about it. Before this I felt bad about using 2-3 towels for the shower over the course of my stay, instead of just using one. Till I'm the only person who puts the do not disturb sign on the door when I masturbate in hotel rooms.
Yo, my brother popped a bag of popcorn and that shit smells like ass for some reason.
Jax often films it when the cleaning ladies walk in. His videos are on effect. Just on the other side of things, when I was staying in a hotel I once had a maid walk in right as the girl I was freaking orgasmed really loudly. We heard a crash as they sprinted out the room. I ran after them, naked because we were scared and they just left the whole trolley of cleaning supplies. I checked, the room's security was still set to private, so they shouldn't have come in.
I don't even know.
Looking back I can understand why they would leave their stuff behind if a naked man started running out of his room at you. Sorry for any traumatized maids out there.
It's like it got to a point where like my stomach feels upset and like I'm going.
Man made here.
It's it.
I never walked in on anything, but I touched a small
some
dot of
cereal?
poop that I thought
No,
was a
like my
cigarette
stomach is
burn in the
upset for some reason.
bathtub. I wish I could have seen my face. I'd wager there are many maidens who would love to trade places with you if that's your worst experience. I was planning on going to apply for a housekeeping job at a hotel tomorrow. Frick this thread. I know, it sounds like a nice, quiet job, and I know how moderately disheveled I'll leave a hotel room, but other people seem to crap too much. Not me, but a friend worked as a maid at a hotel for quite a while and there was a couple staying that had been there for around 3 months. The woman staying was morbidly obese and pretty much stayed in bed constantly because of her size. Alright I suppose, but in these 3 months they refused room service every day. So to clarify, this woman stayed in bed all day and didn't have her bed changed once in 3 months. Finally, after 3 months, the couple came
Officer
to the
Jenny
desk
is
and
the
said they were
nurse
leaving
in
but refused to pay anything and just said they did not have the
generation.
money.
I mean,
They
not
left and of
generation,
course the
but
hotel
this
called the
universe.
police. Nothing could have prepared the maids for what they were about to walk into. The walls had been smeared with crap and other bodily fluids. There were stacks and stacks of moldy fast food and cups sitting on the tables, and the grime in the bathroom had reached a new level of disgusting. The worst thing though was the bed. It turned out the woman had not only stayed in bed, but had not bothered to leave to go to the bathroom, so there were pee and crap stains all over. The mattress was still damp and as you can imagine the smell was unbelievable. Pretty much everything in the room had to be dumped and the room professionally deep cleaned due to the smell. Even the carpet had to be changed because of mysterious stains which no one wanted to investigate. So this one time I was at work with one other girl and we had cleaned about 20 rooms that day, no stayovers, so it took a good couple of hours. We go to our last room at checkout time and we knock on the door and the door slowly opens. Oh my god. There stands a guy no taller than 5 feet, ripped clothes, track pants, dirt all over, like his face and everything. His hair was a mess and had the grossest beard I've ever seen. He clearly lives on the streets and hasn't showered in a few weeks. He tells us he isn't ready to check out yet, so we leave and go wait at the front desk. Our manager tells us he came in with a voucher for one night from the Salvation Army. Okay, whatever. So finally we see him leave and go to the room. Remembering what he looked like should have prepared us for what we were about to see, but nope. We open the door and the smell hits us instantly. We walk over to the window to help air it out and notice sweatpants on top of the TV. He peed himself and left his pants here. Not okay. I walk over to the bathroom as the other girl starts stripping the sheets and I notice crap smeared all over the shower. Really not freaking okay. As I am standing there trying to figure out what I am gonna do, all I hear from my co-worker is, "Are you freaking kidding me?" I walk out and she's pointing to the bed and said he peed the bed. Great, now we need to bring a new mattress up from the basement. But oh wait. She goes to lift up the sheets and what do you know?
I don't care about his damn
Crap
toga
freaking
pee.
everywhere. At this point we're both pee off to the max and disgusted. We call our manager and he comes in, gets his wife to take care of the crap room and all was well. That job freaking sucked. Got some good stories from there though. TL. DR. Homeless guy stays at hotel
Okay,
and
I'm done
shoots
with that League of
everywhere,
Legends game.
leaving
What's up?
everything
I'm done.
behind. Gag. He comes
There's
in,
no one there.
gets his wife to take care of the crap room and all was well. Not for his marriage.
I've heard everything.
I wasn't the one doing the cleaning, but this actually hit me pretty hard when it happened.
His name is Willie.
2011. Myself and
Why
a
he walk
couple
like
friends
that?
were out
Walk
visiting
like
my
he
frat boy cousin
take a
at
shit.
UCLA. We attend the frat's massive New Year's party.
I'm gonna start walking like that. The
We all
first time
proceed to get
you
incredibly
hang out, I'm
drunk
gonna walk just like
and
that.
have an
Oh my
all-around
gosh.
great time.
Walk just
I
like
pass
that.
out sometime
I'm gonna
around
like
2 or 3 in
run
the
away
morning.
from you.
I wake up to complete and utter devastation. At
No
some point in
offense.
the night, a careless
Wow.
partygoer slammed into a makeshift bar, knocking over an entire Gatorade cooler full of jungle
What do you mean,
juice.
wow?
Nobody bothered to clean
I'm
it
being
up at
honest.
the time. So in the
Wanna be-
morning, it
wanna
felt
me
So
to be
you
like the
honest?
abandoned your
floor was
friend?
covered with
Yeah.
vomit. There was
Alright, so
cracked
I
up
understand why
glass
she
in
said
the
she
bathrooms.
abandoned you.
I was kidding,
That's crazy.
but Brianna wasn't
I like
kidding.
it.
You freaking name it.
I was
Oh,
kidding.
so
Brianna
Soldiers
wasn't kidding.
everywhere. Wounded soldiers littering every windowsill and tabletop in the house. etc.
Chinese
Keep
niggas
in
is
mind,
actually
the house was not exactly small. There were 7 or 8 rooms, each housing 2 or 3
Hey, dude, my
people,
shoulder felt like
with even
this.
more sleeping over more often than not. At the peak of the party, there were well over 150 people packed into the house, with enough drugs and alcohol to sedate Xerxes' army for a
Time to
week.
play another
Upon waking
game.
up, sometime in the early afternoon,
What game?
my friend and I leave the room
Time
in
to play
question
another
and
match.
go out on the deck for
You
a
said you
drink.
wasn't gonna pay another
That's
night.
when I see her, a
That's not what I
friendly-looking
said.
You did
middle-aged
say that.
Hispanic
I said-
woman on her
I
hands
said,
and knees
let me
scrubbing the
check
floor
someone chat.
furiously.
Done.
My heart immediately sank.
Match.
How long had she been
Black.
there? Surely
I'm about to
she's been
strike
there
it
a
like a
while.
match.
There's
Being
no
black is not a
garbage in
personality
sight,
trait.
and the bathroom is spotless. Unreal. Here's the kicker.
Neither is like me.
Probably around 9 or
Neither
10
is like
sitting
me. What's your
patiently on the
point?
couch playing an old Game Boy. He looks up at me for a second as I emerge from the room.
Oh my god, you better not flinch, I
Girls be
swear to
on
God.
Twitter. Girls be on Twitter like,
Goes back to
I
playing
love
his game.
kayaking.
Frick. My
I'm,
buddy and I finish
big-
our scene
I'm so
and head out
big
to
of,
grab a
like,
bite
anime
to eat.
and, like,
We stroll around
so,
town for another
like,
hour or so and
like,
return
bitch.
at 4:30. She's still freaking
Anime
there,
is not a
scrubbing the
personality.
floor, still trying to get the last bits of booze out of the freaking floorboards. Her kid is still freaking sitting on that same couch,
Like, the
playing
anime
his
is not a
Game Boy.
personality.
As we walk into the room, he looks up again.
It's like being
Wait,
gay is in the
then goes back to his game. He's
Exactly.
actually freaking used to this. I can't imagine half my childhood being spent waiting for my mom to finish cleaning up after overprivileged frat boys every freaking day. That made me
tired of all
really
these
sad.
people being
I'm
like,
really late to
Chief
this
Keef
thread,
ain't
so
this,
it'll
she's like,
probably
Chief Keef
get
fake,
buried.
Chief Keef.
But
What does
I'd
that to
like
do with
think I've learned
anything?
something
You talk about
today.
Chief Keef for no reason.
My grandma worked in a
Stop
You
flinching!
in New Mexico,
Oh.
You don't remember the
and a
song?
group of priests
Like,
came in once and
It's
crapped
that
in a
Chief
small
Keef,
trash
it's that
can.
Chief Keef
So
fake,
there's
Chief
that.
Keef fucking,
I worked
like,
at what I affectionately
I
dub
mean,
a
Lamb Ron is
infested
it.
crack den. Some
I'm
with
tired of y'all
idiots.
talking about that later.
One,
I don't
first
live with
dead
him.
body. Woman
Mm.
had offed herself
It's just
because
love,
she
so
found her husband
what's
cheating.
up?
Empty bottles of wine and pill bottles on
You can get
nightstand with a
over.
note.
Why are
Manager
we
was
the
mad
road?
because she
Hey,
cracked
Adrian.
everywhere and
How
we
you
couldn't
doing?
Why
leave
is this
the room
video
till
being
we
played?
replaced the
It's used for
mattress.
background
Two,
noise.
woman who had medical issues. She was there
Adrian
for 2
can't play
weeks and
games.
went
I can't
home.
play game in
We had
silence.
to hire
Background
a
noise.
professional
That's
cleaning
silent.
service because
Even
she
though
had
I'm over
crap
here being crazy
everywhere.
20.
It was like she'd locked her
It
dog
makes me
there.
feel so
It was slippery
uncomfortable.
and trodden everywhere like a colostomy bag had busted and she just didn't care.
It's like,
Girl
you know, like
slips
how
out of
Lost
her room.
Puppy is like,
Housekeeping
he's
walks
like
in and
another
finds a pile of drugs on
Excuse
the
me?
table. Coke
That's
lined
what this
up,
video
8
is.
needles next to spoons. The
That's fucked
works.
up.
She calmly locked the door and went to the front
Okay,
desk where we then locked the room down and had cops waiting for them to return. Turns
Yeah,
out
well, I'm
girl was
doing-
underage and
well,
the
how much-
30-something
I
pimp
never
was
heard
having
you
a
that.
party in the
I did
backyard.
ask him that.
4. Pot plant grown in the
I'm doing
backyard.
okay, I'm just,
5.
you know,
Corn
chilling.
cobs attached to walls, on the bed, under the
I'm catching a
mattress.
sand shrew so I can, like,
Lubricants everywhere. IT
You
was
do
on
look
the
a
ceiling.
sand shrew.
We still
Your
do
face
not
was like a
know
sand
how.
screw.
Luckily they wore condoms,
You
but
go,
left them all
go
over
to
the
the
floors.
minor.
6.
That's literally you,
Chick
but
got
okay.
kidnapped from a local club and tied up in the room
You
for
feel
a
like-
day or so.
How's
She
UMBC?
called the cops, which was a fun surprise when I came
How's,
into
like,
the
the
hotel.
Smash Club and
There's
stuff?
more, but those are the highlights.
Oh, wait,
I
that's for your
usually
college
mention
friend?
when people
Yes.
ask about my time there. My mother
I'm
works
telling.
for a hotel and she
What do you
would
mean you
have a
telling?
customer who would come by
I don't know.
every Tuesday at 2 p.m. with a different
Yeah, I
one
realize
every
half the
week.
things that come out of
He
my
would
mouth are
always
pretty
leave the room pretty
I
messy,
see.
but nothing too out of the norm. But this particular week, he brought a particularly heavy-set African-American woman, and he checked out much earlier than usual. When my mother went
Oh, wait, I'm
into the
supposed to
room,
read a
she
manga
smelled a
chapter.
foul stench, and right in the middle
Manga.
of the bed was a large
Just kidding.
pile of human crap.
Manga.
She threw out the bedding.
I'm still
Poor
reading.
mom. I'm not a hotel worker or anything, but one time my husband and I were staying at a hotel and bought some chocolate body paint. Well, I painted his knob and then licked and bobbed that sucker for a while. Afterwards, I noticed
I'm gonna
that
show
Oh,
you
you
my
graduated.
had run down
I
his
forgot
nose
people
and
do graduated.
created a very disgusting
Graduating
looking
college?
puddle of pooish
No, like, I
color.
didn't know, like, he
I'm
was,
sure
like,
the housekeeper thought she was
okay.
washing poop too. This
Dude,
is
I'm
a
gonna show you what
silver lining
Twitter's never
story. Sometimes the poop you think is poop is just poopy chocolate dong drool. You live up to your name, and I love it. I worked in room service at a hotel and got to enter many
Why did you
rooms
send me a
every
picture of
night.
Murray?
The most disturbing
That was like
memory
way
was
long
to a
ago.
room with a drunk guy in his late 20s who was obviously partying with
I'm
two
gonna check that
girls
later.
who couldn't have been more than 15.
No, you
They
gotta wait.
ordered several cocktails.
Nigga, I'll
I
check that shit
immediately told
later.
my boss what I saw, but he said
You
we
say it,
couldn't
and then
prove
Honestly,
it.
Brianna,
The kids
yes, I
would be
thought
nothing.
you guys
Then
stayed
I
forever.
delivered a single bottle of water to a room
I
on
thought
an
you'll never
On
leave
the table were
UMBC.
scattered foreign magazines with gay obscene
No,
images.
don't
The
look at you.
bottle of water was for a
Look
late
at your
teens,
dad.
early 20s guy who struck me as a total H. I was tipped $20 and given a wink, probably encouraging me to come back after my
I'm gonna start
shift
purifying
and have a
Pokemon.
threesome. Another time I delivered food to 3 amazingly hot women
Right
who
now,
looked like they just walked off
gotta
the
get
set
that
of
bread.
Brazzers.
Any
One of
means
them was
necessary.
recovering
Yes,
from
once
a boob job and the
if it
other
stays
two
in
were there for
Vegas,
support. A
what
girl in
happens in
recovery
Vegas stays
was
in
a
Vegas.
bathrobe and clearly still on pain meds. The other two
That's
were
not
in
true.
boy-sized Batman and
Okay,
Superman briefs and wife
thanks.
beaters. They were super nice and tipped big. One time a woman
Dude,
just
if that was the
divorced
case,
her
that
husband
means
and
they should
checked into a
been
really
in
nice
Vegas.
suite. She consumed 4 bottles of fairly expensive
He
wine
said,
in about 4
I couldn't
hours.
imagine staying there
On her
forever,
fifth
my
call,
goodness.
I took her order but went to her room empty-handed. I asked if everything was okay and we had
Vegas
a
ain't
heart-to-heart
that
talk
bad.
for about an hour. She had every
I've
intention
never
of
been.
drinking herself to oblivion.
I don't think I ever want to go. I feel like
She
there's
checked
too much
out the
bullshit
next
down
day.
there.
My manager was
I
a
feel
huge
like
cokehead,
Vegas is
and he
a
would
good
always get
place.
ski-eaten out of his mind after work at the bar in the hotel.
Tea
To
is
keep
cookie,
me there and
which
for
good
someone
enough
to
for
talk
me.
to
Tea is
endlessly, he
cookie
let me
with
drink
good
as
enough
much
for
as I
me.
wanted for free after
Cookie,
closing, and we were
starts
the
with.
only 2 people left. One night we stayed so late partying that the front doors opened and the day crew started coming into work.
To be
That
honest.
was humiliating and I'm amazed we weren't busted. I know I'm late to the dance, so this will probably get buried.
What?
But when I was a young,
A
I
rat?
just saw
rooms in
no.
Missoula,
I just saw one of my friends
Montana,
post Happy
fish
Mother's
came
Day on the
through
story.
town,
I was like,
and
why
our
didn't you tell
humble
your mom that,
establishment
right?
somehow ended up
I didn't say
around
that to
host
them,
to legions
but
of
then
fish
I thought it,
fans.
and then I
Oh my
remembered.
crap. Cleaning
Their
those
mom is
rooms
dead.
was the most vile
I'm
thing
glad I didn't say
Damn.
that.
ever
I'm
experienced.
glad I didn't say that.
Boxes upon empty
Oh my
boxes
God.
of Sailor.
I'm
Used
glad
condoms
it-
laying on the carpet. Vomit
I feel like
everywhere,
Vegas just gonna
and
take all your
occasionally a
money.
used needle. Oh Christ.
Well, oh my God,
That's what it's there
Mel.
I
for.
can still smell the rank, crusty, 12 hours old hippie vomit. Zero
Mel, you
problem
almost
with
like
hippies,
ended your
for the
career.
record. Just the crusty.
Almost ended
dirty,
You almost a
prolific
career and a
toxic
friendship.
I almost ended up a whole
Dr. Dirty Hippies are called dirty hippies for a damned good reason. Housekeeping supervisor here. I've had to call the cops and then help bust a guy posting Craigslist glory hole ads in our hotel.
Wow.
That is, he would be the mouth on the other side. He had a fake folding wall he had set up right when you walked into the room with a hole in it. I'm not sure if we caught him before he got any action, but that wall looked pretty used. When I
Wow.
was 17 I worked at a hotel in housekeeping, and aside from having to crawl into big jacuzzis to clean out nasty stuff, it wasn't so bad. But once,
Brianna,
I was called
fuck.
to a
Brianna,
room
you trying to go to
and 2 women
Vegas?
answered the door and invited me in, saying they needed the room cleaned.
We're gonna
and
get
that their
lost
gross husbands had
and stranded.
clogged the toilet. See, this would have been fine if their husbands weren't left behind to watch ME. Those 2 weirdos laid on their beds with no
Wait, let me see
TV
what you
on,
sent me.
mind you, and watched my every move as I cleaned and vacuumed and bent over. It was awful, and then I had to unclog their diarrhea toilet while they watched. Worst day
Crispy.
at that job. I'd rather find condoms and bloody sheets. Searching for the housekeeper who found my brother after he'd killed himself. It was in Destin, Florida, and I
where are you
think about
showing
that
me?
poor housekeeper a lot. If you're Redding,
No.
I'm really sorry you had to witness that.
No.
It was very unkind and inconsiderate of him. During school I worked as a cleaner at a caravan park for a few summers on the east coast of England. During this time I heard one especially disgusting story from some people who had worked at another place further up the coast. When cleaning the caravan's chalets we were meant to always check the kettles and throw any old water away, but some cleaners were a bit lax on this and left it out.
I'm trying to get rid of that
some
Mogro.
guests arrived one day and
Fuck.
being British, the first thing they did was turn on the full of water
It should be dead, yeah.
kettle to make tea. However, as it boiled they noticed something wasn't quite right about it, and upon further inspection it turned out that the previous guests had left a giant crap in it. This was just gossip, but frankly given the type of customer these places attract I'm fairly confident it's based on the truth. Worst I personally came across was a huge pee stain on the carpet in a bedroom. And I know it was pee because whilst wondering what it was I knelt down to smell it. Not a fun job. My mom worked at a motel called the Ramada. She said she went to clean a room for a guest that was staying for another night and found a couple really strung out junkies shooting up. She said there was vomit everywhere and the room was absolutely trashed. She said she nearly got sick from the smell. She also said the toilet was clogged and there were fesses all over the bathroom. She apparently walked back to the front desk and just quit her job, mostly because of the constant harassment she had received from her manager. Apparently tons of terrible crap goes down in that hotel. All these make my cheesy crumble on the carpet seem so small. I still feel bad about it. You have been visited by the fashion doggo. Comment your envy strengthens me so you always look beautiful. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person. I found a dead girl when I was 12. Reddit. What are your unforgettably creepy moments? I saw the aftermath of what happens when a 350-pound man jumps out a 20-story window. It does not look like what they show on TV. I'm not sure what they show on TV, but was it better or worse, even though that's relative. When I was 12 years old, my friends and I were riding our bikes through some woods down an old dirt road that wasn't much used anymore. I decided it would be cool for me to go off-road and rode off the road into the forest. I got about 50 feet before I got disoriented and started going towards the creek, which was in a dell down a steep hill from there. Something else I didn't know. So I crashed down the hill and hit this huge boulder collection before coming to a rest. While I was sitting there, off towards the road, I could hear my friends calling to me, so I knew which way to go. I started over towards their voices and saw a super old rusted out car. I was a huge license plate collector back then,
That's
and
some
finding
bullshit.
rusted out cars in the woods was not that odd of an occurrence. So I went to see if I could harvest the license plate. When I got there, I saw there were bones in the front seat and a pile of rags. It was full of odors of the lost ark with
Who's
a
Olivia?
on a pike kind of thing.
It's
Hey,
Olivia.
stop.
Who's Olivia?
Ivy, do you think I talked to a girl named Olivia? That's what this
Called the police, and after
Who's
some
Olivia?
investigation determined
I don't
that
know.
the man had disappeared during a blizzard in the late 50s and was never heard from again. I met his widow and children and won an award from the town. I'll never forget that feeling. Creepy as heck. This occurred in 1981. He had been missing 20 plus years at that point. I am now 43 years old. I have no long-term effects from this event. I remember it. Remember being scared at the time and then completely puzzled as to why finding something by accident and then telling my parents about it was such a big deal.
Why are we still fighting like first stage Pokemon? What the hell? We're in like our late 20s.
My mom might have had it. I'll ask my sister if she's seen it. No, I didn't get the license plate. My friends and I went back after all the dust had died down and they had pulled the car out. I've not been back there in decades. I decided it would be cool for me to go off-road and rode off the road into the forest.
I might take a nap
You have
after
no
this.
idea how long it took my
Look
brain
how.
to comprehend that story.
I'm gonna watch
More
Haku, the
traumatic and
fuck?
creepy, but saw the immediate aftermath of
I didn't say I was gonna
run
take a
over by
nap.
the school bus next to the one I was on. It was a cold morning and there was steam coming off the body. I remember that and the spilled lunchbox.
Athletes talking
This is why they have
body.
sweeper bars on the front of
You
buses
got the-
now to make sure kids walk far
Okay.
enough in front of the bus that the driver can see them. I have a young
Thank
daughter
you.
now,
It's a
and these
song,
are the
but
things
okay.
that keep me up at
Like
night.
that Olivia song with a song.
When I
Supposedly.
was in primary school, 6 or 7 year old, while lined up waiting for the
I
bus to
hate
arrive, one of
you.
my classmates who was tossing a ball up in the air and catching it missed the catch and ran after
That's
the ball
tough,
and was
like,
struck by the bus that was coming to pick us up. The front wheel crushed
Was that
her
you with your
skull.
ex?
This happened about 10 feet from me. I saw her
Doesn't
brain
mean like a-
literally pop out of her head.
Oh god.
God, that must have ruined the bus driver's
Never
life
mind.
too. Saw a dead guy pulled out of a creek on my parents' property when I was 16. He flipped his truck while high drunk and trespassing. He decided to leave when the cops were called on him. He didn't make the turn onto the bridge and it flipped his truck into the creek. He broke his neck upon impact. A bunch of guys tried to get him out but the mud was suctioning him down. When the EMTs and police showed up, they got him out but he was bloated and white by that time. They put him on the rescue sled to pull him up the bank. His bloated, white head was bobbing because of his broken neck. That image is burned
That's
into
some,
my
like,
brain.
I don't know.
His bloated,
Full course
white head
meal.
was bobbing because of his broken neck. My god, that is
Awesome chicken.
absolutely horrifying. The rest of
or
the
some like
story is as standard as those kinds
steak
of situations get.
and mashed
But
potato
that one sentence makes it so much worse.
and string
I hope
beans
that seeing that had no adverse effects on you.
or like
And I
mixed
hope enough time
vegetables.
has passed for you not to be mentally thrown back to that time in your everyday life. I used to live in a funeral home. Literally in a funeral home. My parents owned it, but we didn't have enough income to really support a home for ourselves. So we took part of the building and kind of converted it into an apartment. Due to some pretty bad planning on
Due
my
to the money,
parents' part, we had
aroma.
the living room like right next
My
to
bitch, she
the
got a
area where we kept
diploma.
the bodies,
She
which
got
was
right fit
right
on her
next to the
own.
embalming room. Basically every day I'd see a random naked
Damn,
dead
giraffe
guy or
rig
two
is
sitting on a
ass.
table right outside where I was playing. Sometimes my dad would be working in the embalming room. You know what I mean by working. And since there were pretty big windows on the door, God knows why, I would get to see almost everything. From a guy getting stabbed and having his blood let out, to the
I feel like
egregious
taunt should
stitching
have
that would have to be
priority.
done to guys coming from the morgue. But as Canex was getting at, all this stuff isn't really that bad. I mean, you don't really know any of the people that you see dead, so there's no real psychological impact on you. The only scary thing is when friends of the family get sent to the funeral home. That could put a man in the mental clinic. I grew up near San Francisco, and for my 5th birthday I wanted to walk the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time. About halfway through, a guy climbed over the guide rail and jumped. I had no idea what it meant at that age, but I still remember almost everything about that day. Where we had parked, what I was wearing, the weather, everything. My grandma ended up picking up his wallet he left for someone to find and turning it into the police. It was still warm from being in his pocket. Whoa, you know the SF gate stopped reporting how many jumpers per year decades ago because
I'm gonna
people
try
were
something now.
trying to be the 500th,
I'll see which one does more damage.
1000th, etc. I don't know if this would be too difficult for you to watch, but there is a really well done documentary about people who jump from Golden Gate called The Bridge. Lake Erie in Ohio. My family and I were swimming in it as it was the closest thing to a beach we had. I felt something touch my leg and I just assumed it was seaweed or a fish. Then my stepfather felt something touch his leg. I was underwater briefly when he felt it touch him. He looked at me when I came up and his eyes were wide and afraid. He asked me if it was me and I assured him it wasn't. At that moment he realized it was a body. He was holding my 3-year-old little brother, his son. We were maybe 4 feet deep at the time and I was struggling to swim and was maybe still 8-10 feet away from him. With his right arm he held my little brother and with his left arm he unsubmerged a 7-year-old boy from the darkness of the Great Lakes. He had faced my little brother away so he wasn't subjected to the sight of the dead boy. He carried them both about 30-40 feet shore before screaming for my mother to come and take my little brother. It was horrific. Moments later the boy's family is running towards us and I will never forget the screams of the mother who had left responsibility with her 17-year-old son to take care of his little brother. There was a nearby nurse who tried to perform CPR to no avail. His brother lost sight of him only 15 minutes earlier. His mother started beating the crap out of him while she was crying and screaming in Spanish. It was in the newspaper and although it matters little, the lifeguards on the beach were given full credit for recovering the boy. My stepfather was not mentioned. I was 13 on that day and will never forget the little boy or the sounds of his mother. Just writing this made my eyes swell. Additional information. It was Mentor on the lake and it happened in the summer of 99 or 00. The last name was Latino. I have been trying to find the article on Google but I can't. I would really appreciate it if anybody could
Another
locate
Sandshrew?
it. My mother no longer has the newspaper article. Thanks for the consolation. I wish the mother could receive these kind words. I remember hearing about a lawsuit for the lack of sufficient lifeguards or something. If that helps you locate it, I will read some of your kind words to my stepfather. This makes me sad, especially for the boy who had the responsibility of watching him. You know that'll hang over him for the rest of his life, and that his parents will blame him to some extent. Just sad. On another note, I'm freaking terrified of swimming in lakes because I always imagine this sort of scenario happening. I was present at an armed robbery when I was 10 and had to hide in the shed. I saw everything. It was horrible. It was 2 doors down from my house. I made my mum buy all sorts of locks and security stuff after that. Right on. Appropriate reaction. Indirectly, having to handle my mother's corpse until the ambulance arrived to pronounce her dead. It was unpleasant, obviously, in and of itself. Seeing that rigor mortis had set in and the chest compressions were clearly a futile effort, but that's not the thing that gets me. What gets me is that every so often I rub my arms when they are cold and the skin feels just enough like her body that I'm taken back in an instant. No warning. No consistency. It gets unpleasant in winter. Oh man, that's awful. I empathize with you though. When my dad passed, we waited in the hospital room with his body for 3 hours until my sister could get there and break the news. We sat there watching him turn blue purple, and the awful death stench slowly creeping
Can you
in.
imagine watching
Chilling,
when you're
haunting,
watching like
something I sincerely
care
hope
about.
no one ever has to experience again. A few months ago I came home from work and found my mom lying dead on the floor from an overdose. I'll never
I mean,
get
this
the
video is
image of
dark.
those purple feet out of my head. I'm sorry. When
How do
I
you
was
increase the
learning to drive,
tempo?
my father would accompany me. There was a football game in town that the rest of my family was at, but I was not going for some reason. On my way home, and into my neighborhood, fairly large neighborhood, we went past a plain white van that was off.
Okay,
It
whatever.
turned on and followed us all the way to the road that my house is on. It went to the cul-de-sac. My father took the truck to the game, leaving no vehicles in the parking area and myself alone at home. That white van decided to pull into my driveway, so I ran into my father's closet,
Single-handedly
grabbed the
carrying a team
16-gauge
is
shotgun, 2 shells, and walked out onto my front porch with
Is that what you're
it
doing?
the van. That
Yes.
van went into reverse and backed out of my driveway faster than it
You're
came.
always yelling
It
at
was
me.
a very
Even
strange
on the
experience,
It's
and I
not
sat on
over
my
half.
porch for a good 30 minutes
How they yelling at
before
you?
going
Over
back
half.
inside for the night. TL.
In the game chat, they're
DR.
like, hey,
Plain white van
thanks a lot.
followed
They're like
me
being
home.
sarcastic.
There's some plumber out there that
They're being like-
tells a story about
they're
the
being
time
like-
he
Hey, thanks a lot,
accidentally pulled into the wrong
dumbass.
driveway and almost
Yeah, no,
got
they'll be like,
shot by
thank
a
you. Like,
teenager.
I'm like halfway across the map.
I
They're like,
was
thank
15
you.
and I was
Thank you for
playing in a
this.
tennis tournament. It was a
Being all
typical hot
sarcastic and
summer.
shit.
Okay, thank you for
Another player
helping
who
me,
must have been in
thanks.
his 40s
Yeah,
was
when I'm
serving.
like halfway
He
across.
tossed the serve up in the air and then collapsed on the hard court. I rushed over to help and started CPR.
You should tell them off like you tell everyone else.
Until the ambulance came, which was about 15 minutes, but it seemed like hours.
This game
The
again.
EMTs took over the CPR and tried to resuscitate him with injections and defibrillators to no avail. They pronounced him dead on the tennis court. I had to continue my match after they moved the body off of the courts. My hands kept shaking, so I forfeited the match and sat under a nearby tree just staring into space. His friend came back to find me near the courts to thank me. He told me about his friend, about his life, and his family.
Finally, some good fucking
Strangely,
food.
that made me feel better. I learned from that day how precious life is and how it can all change in an instant. She was gone that afternoon. I'm sorry, but this is bugging the heck out of me. Did you go back and she was gone? Does this mean her killer is possibly still at large since no authorities were involved? I can't imagine that the police just taking the body and leaving no evidence of an investigation in less than a day. My neighbor didn't pick up his kid from school one day, so I had to break into his house. I found him on the basement floor with no clothes on. I could tell he was still alive, but obviously there was brain damage as he couldn't form words or even move. I later found out he had a brain aneurysm, and he had no clothes on cause it happened while he was masturbating. What an inconvenient time. On a date at the beach, body washes up on shore. Let's turn this date into a threesome.
What
I
the
was
fuck?
working at an ice cream shop when I was in high school, and at night in the winter it would only be me and another manager. It was in a pretty nice area, and behind the store there was a giant park that got really creepy at night. That night the manager was a girl, like myself, not too much older than me, and when we are closing we have to do trash. We were both pretty small, but we could easily do it by ourselves. I decided to take the trash out at night because she was counting money. So I get all the bags out and I walk outside, and in the parking lot next to the trash there is a man standing there. He was wearing sweats and there was just this look of hatred on his face that I've never seen in anybody before. I ran
What did
back,
that do so
locked the doors
much?
to be safe, and did some dishes thinking that I could do the trash later. I walked into the main room of the store where there are all the windows, and he was standing there in the window, just looking
Wait, is
in,
Philo ice
and I
types?
will never forget the smile that
Hold
came
on.
on his face when he saw
I don't think
me
it's the ice
again.
type yet.
It was the worst mix of evil and complete joy. I can't even describe how
I think it is
his
the
eyes
ice type.
were.
Hold
They
on.
were filled with hate.
Yes, I.
A hate that I've never seen on anybody before. I ran into the back room with my manager and we hid there for what felt like 2 hours until the police came. By then he was gone. However, He was arrested a few weeks later for brutally violating and killing a female girl. My stature and hair color. Maybe it's just cause I'm a girl, but this story is the creepiest one in this thread. In the 4th grade, a dude hung himself outside our school. They made us draw pictures about the guy as an assignment that morning for some reason. I remember the teachers saying something like, if only that guy could see what we're doing for him now, maybe he wouldn't have killed himself. I don't think the guy even had any connection to the school or anyone in it. Just someone that wanted to die. I don't remember what I drew, but I remember one kid's drawing. He drew a before frame where the dude was happy, then an after frame where he killed himself, then a why after frame where death was saying welcome to heck. Comma, if only that guy could see what we're doing for him now, maybe he wouldn't have killed himself. What? I was flying to India and we had just stopped in Germany. I was 14 and sitting next this old guy who either was asleep the whole time. I shack him because we landed because he was kinda laying no me.
Phil, you're always
No
hitting
response.
yourself.
I was an unaccompanied minor, so when the stewardess came to get me, she looked at him, checked his pulse, and then everyone was ordered to stay where they were, including me. The paramedics came and declared him dead. I never knew for how long. I had never seen a dead guy up close before and was surprised at the time. I thought he would smell of something rotten when he died or would make a noise or something beforehand. To this day I always think if I had noticed earlier I could have helped him. I also had a dead guy lay on my shoulders for 8 hours, and I fell asleep during that flight as well, so there was a good chance I used his head as a pillow while I slept. Creepy, but
The
that's life.
ASMR.
If he died silently on a long flight, I'm willing to put big money on him dying of a massive pulmonary embolism. When a big one of those hits, you die. Period. Even if it happened in the hospital in front of a team of doctors, he'd still be dead. By not noticing,
I'm sorry.
all
I'm
you
not
did
even
was
supposed to be
preserve
using
his
that word on the
dignity
stream
and
anymore,
death.
but like,
It's
When I was
cool.
18
It's
and
cool. It's
invincible,
cool.
League just
I
makes me
drove
so
down
pissed.
to local place where teenagers and creepers hung out with a couple of my
Like,
friends.
I literally told them, like,
A
I
few
usually
minutes
hype,
into
but
the
I'm like,
ride,
hey,
one
I
of
can't
my
do
friends
everything.
gets
Can
a
y'all
call to
fucking
pick
help
some
me?
dude up to go as well.
Said that.
But they were arguing
What'd they
about
say?
it not being safe for him.
Didn't say
He was
shit.
also young and invincible, so he persuaded her to let him come, and I picked him up in the car. They started arguing again and I found out that he got some stupid gang leader dude's sister pregnant and
I want a
ran
Big
out on
Mac.
her and he had a hit on him. I didn't take this seriously because we lived in a place with 70k people. Well, when we got there, we took a couple laps around the cruising, and he was attracting attention, so I went to park. No sooner did he get out of the car than 5 cars surrounded mine. A dozen or so people bolted out and beat the ever-living crap out of him with wooden and metal baseball bats. He ran around screeching, trying to hide on the various sides of my car while we were forced back inside to witness. Within probably 2 minutes, it felt like days, the cops came and the people with bats fled and we were just left sitting there in shock while he lay, dented, on my, also dented, car bleeding against the white paint. I have no idea if he lived or died, but they shut down cruising after that and I really dislike the sounds of bats hitting things. Can't watch mobster movies. They always seem to want to whack people with bats. See, it was the day I realized that I'm not invincible and I needed a new set of friends. I saw what happens to the human body when you are burned alive. Suicide bomber detonated his car on a crowded street,
You
killing
heard that?
several civilians including children. The burned bodies of children curled in fetal positions is probably the worst of a large number of horrible things I've seen humans do to each other. Not creepy, but I found my friend's dead body after he had pulled the trigger. Well, actually ended well, but really stuck with me. This summer I was working as a nanny, my charges, and I went to Bethesda pool a few times a week. One day, the older girl, 11, saw something at the bottom in the shallower end, brought it to my attention, and when I went over to check it out, it was a little boy, maybe 6, all curled up into the fetal position. When I reached in to pull him out, he was completely limp in my arms and he wasn't breathing. I brought him to the side where some lifeguards, who didn't notice him even though there was no one anywhere near him obstructing the view of the bottom, and didn't even notice me yelling for them until I got to the side of the pool and lifted him up onto the concrete, gave him CPR, called the paramedics, etc. I put on a brave face for the girls, but I thought he was dead for sure until later when the cops let me know he wasn't. Thankfully this is a pretty happy story, but the image of his body curled up on the bottom of the pool and the feel of his body limp in my arms just stuck with me for some reason. You saved a life. Once when I was like 10 years old, my dad was unemployed and we were struggling for a few months financially, and some kid in school
I
called me
hate
a broke
how like
bastard over something I don't
after
even remember.
all these
And he
bosses, they're
told me
like
to buy some decent
an
clothes
extra
and that I
boss
looked like
that
a hobo. It
you have to
wasn't that
fight,
bad, he was just
and like
saying
you don't have
trying to
no
hurt me.
time to heal
That
your
really
team.
struck a nerve, so after school I walked up to him while he was sitting on his bike and I punched him so hard on the side of his head that blood started coming out of his nose and his left eye turned red. He screamed, "Oh my god, I can't see." I just felt sick to my stomach and felt like a monster. I just wanted to disappear that moment, but he was fine after a few minutes. I bet he didn't call you a hobo after that. You see, things like this are why I am constantly afraid that I am going to stumble upon a dead body. I work at an emergency vet clinic. We see some flipped up things, but you get desensitized after a while. There are some things, however, that stick with you. I was working front desk overnight one night. It was about 3 AM and nothing was going on. I see a car fly into the lot. The driver almost drove through our front bay window. An older lady gets out and comes running in, screaming hysterically and holding something wrapped in a towel and dripping blood.
Like, we're
She
winning,
came
but
up
like,
to the counter, set it down, and unwrapped it. It was a young kitten cut completely in half.
what? How
A
can
very clean cut.
don't you
Absolutely the most
you
disturbing thing I've seen at work. My
There's no one in
doctor on
chat.
staff and I
I'm just playing a
calmed
game
her
right now.
down as best as we could
Look,
and drove her
Rihanna.
home. The next day we got in touch with her again. Turns out her
Try
dead husband
sauce.
got pee at her and killed
Try
her kitten.
sauce.
He was charged and did time for animal cruelty and assault on his wife. He beat her the same night. TLDR. Kitten cut in half. Yeah, my job is hard. This particular night was the worst. But someone has to do it. No, I don't think she expected us to glue it back together. I think she was so distraught that she had no idea what else to do. We cremated the kitten for her free of charge. I picked out a really pretty urn for her and delivered the ashes to her about a week later, after her husband had been arrested and everything had cleared up a little bit. She was very thankful. This was about 6 months ago and she sends flowers baked goods to the clinic like every month now. This upset me a lot. Not me, but my uncle.
How
He
does that
told
do
me this
anything?
probably 5 years ago when he was very drunk and I haven't heard anything about it before or after. I guess when he was around 7 or 8, some kid who lived on his street had gotten his dad's shotgun and was playing with it in the street with another kid. He pointed it at him and yelled, "Freeze!" The kid put his hands up jokingly and turned to walk away, but the kid pulled the trigger on him. He said there was a red mist hanging in the air. The kid's head was literally gone. No idea what happened after that though. Oh man. My dad said that someone on his little league football team accidentally did this to one of his friends. They were messing around with a hunting rifle and the kid got his head blown off. Just recently it happened again in my town. It really sucks that this sort of stuff happens. Loaded guns inside are very unsafe. I was driving to an out-of-state funeral in the early with my older sister, early morning in late December in New England. As my sister and I drove on the nearly empty Route 95N, we came around a corner which was a little slick with ice, so we slowed down. Come to find around that corner was a huge wreck. A Jeep had rolled and smashed into the guardrail, and only a few cops were there. The young man,
I'm gonna use
who was
Teddy
16,
Ursa for a
had been
extra
thrown from
level
the
because I
car
want
about 20
him to
feet,
evolve.
and a blood-soaked sheet covered some of the body. You could see his bloody socks and jeans. We slowed down just because of the initial shock. Then, we saw this guy, who we later learned was this kid's dad on the news, pulling his car over on the opposite side of the highway, and sprinting with this look of terror and anger and fear, towards the body. We had stopped the car at this point so he could run past, and the cop stopped him and he just broke down screaming. We couldn't hear him because the windows were closed, but it was even creepier seeing this go on silently. So we continue to drive, and then we see the kid's shoes in the middle of the road. Brand new green Nikes, sitting in the road a few feet from each other. We accidentally ran over one, and the thud sound just broke my heart. This kid was 16. Still bothers me to this day. When I was in grade 1, one of my friends was murdered just outside the school in the woods. A week or so later, my friends and I were walking through them like the dumb little shoots we were, and found the knife still covered in blood. One of the guys picked it up and took it back to the school. Luckily it was a simple case and the guy was already arrested, or we could have messed up the evidence for the case. But needless to say, that was what put it in my mind that the murder actually happened. And to more careful, was playing football at a local park about 6 years back now. I'm 17 now BTW, when the ball went a wall and ended up in a pond. A friend tried to go in and get the ball out, got tangled up in the reeds and such, drowned. None of us could do a thing. The ball continued to float there for about 2 weeks after he died, and I had to walk past that same pond daily to go to school. Seeing the ball floating there was and still is the creepiest thing ever. My friends and I used to climb onto the roof of my high school late at night because, well, it was fun. One night my best friend and I brought 2 girls, whom we were crushing on, onto the roof to show them what we thought was a harmless and exciting discovery. After some time exploring as a group, my friend and I thought it appropriate to go explore the rooftops alone with our respective crushes. In the distance I saw what seemed like a fitting spot to have a seat. Well, it turns out it wasn't so fitting because it was a skylight. I only remember up to this point. My friend describes what happened next as the most horrifying experience of his life. After about a few minutes he came looking for me as it turned eerily silent. He approached a shattered skylight and it clicked. We were down there. He yelled and yelled until I finally muttered back a weak "help, I can't move." Police and paramedics were called. He never got a response from the girl. I woke up 2 days later with a concussion, a few broken bones, and some minor internal bleeding. My crush was diagnosed dead on impact. I'm not sure if this is even appropriate in this thread, but frick it, I guess. I work in the glass industry and BC of incidents like this. One of the pieces of glass has to be laminated so you can't bust through. If you walk across one, you'll still go through the top piece though, which is freaking scary. We call it the half-inch heart attack. It happened when I got home from school one afternoon. I had gotten home early and no one else was there. My dog had just had puppies. My mother breeds King Charles Spaniels, and what I found was the most horrendous thing I've seen to this day. We had a parrot at the time who was a total C. Basically super territorial, and he decided to attack these puppies. I'm not going to go into the gory details, but there was blood and fur everywhere. Out of the 5 there were only 2 left and they had to be put down. The smell though, it was freaking awful and I'll never forget it. The poor mother dog. I lived through the war in Bosnia from 1992 to 1995. Found a dead student in the middle of campus while I was walking to a morning class. Her body was still warm when I checked her pulse. Called the paramedics on a campus phone. They tried for a long time to revive her, but to no avail. It was creepy in the sense that you are never really expecting to see a body on your way to class at 8 a.m.
Beat the
This
other
is
team.
exactly how an episode of Law
The
and
what?
Order
So they can win.
SVU
I decided to
started.
beat the other team so they can win.
Why?
Spotted a dead man floating in a
Because
river
my
when
team
I was
is being
30. Called
disrespectful.
police from a
And
park
they're
phone booth.
being
A
assholes.
detective
Not
So I'm gonna
leave.
beat the other team.
She
Huh?
was
Why not
gone
just
that afternoon.
leave?
That's
I'm
not
gonna beat the
cool.
other team.
A few weeks
Why
ago,
you so
I'm gonna beat the other
petty?
team.
Why you so petty?
No,
outside
no,
my
no, no,
window.
no.
I won't
Cause
ever
they're
forget her
disrespectful.
screams
I'm
and
the
her
one who got
rapid
them.
breathing when I
I'm
went
the one
out to
who put them in
flag down the
position.
police.
And
I
all
feel
I asked
guilty
was
for not
for them to
doing
help
more
me,
than
right?
calling 9.
And the role I played, I don't
But
have
I
a
am also
lane.
angry because
I have
I
like
heard the police
on the jungle,
interviewing a
right?
girl,
Yes.
asking if she
And
heard
so
anything, and she had heard the screaming. She said yes but didn't call the police. How do you freaking
So
not call the police? How horrible are you to not bother to try to help? I
yeah.
hope she feels guilty. The poor woman deserved better. And now she is dead and the guy hasn't been found yet. So wait,
hey, you're just
by
gonna
she was
evolve.
gone that afternoon, do you mean that someone found her and someone came and recovered the body? Or do you mean that the murderer came back and moved her somewhere else? When I was 7 years old, my parents were going through a very tough time. They decided to split up for a while because my mom was going through a crazy partying phase. She got custody. I was too young to understand what was going on, but I hated my father. We're best friends now and my parents have been back together for years. My mom was just too young when they first got together and she had my sister. One night when my mother went out drinking with friends, she left me home with my 12-year-old sister. We lived in an extremely bad neighborhood apartment complex that was full of miscellaneous crime. I was playing Warlock on Sega Genesis when I started hearing yelling outside. We had a double glass door facing the porch area that connected the apartments. We got up to look out the window and saw a white police officer talking to a black man. The black man pulls out a bag of something and eats it. The cop instantly takes his baton and hits him across the face. It knocked the guy to the ground and the cop gets down and starts bashing his skull into the concrete. After a minute or so, the cop stops and calls in for an ambulance. He killed that man for swallowing a bag of an illicit substance. My sister was on the local news the next day explaining what happened, but no one believed us. Even though there was blood all over the concrete, the officer claimed he choked to death after swallowing the bag. It's one reason why I will never trust police officers that I don't know on a personal level. When I was younger, I used to have really intense visual hallucinations.
Damn, this is
Some
what job
cool
interviews
stuff,
be like.
glowing orbs, floating hands. But the creepiest thing that I ever saw was my own dead body on the floor in front of me wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing at the time. This might be the caliber of the other stories here, but this freaked me out when I first saw it. So like 4 years ago when I was in high school, I used to exercise in the basement of my house, which is connected to the garage because my house is built into the side of a hill. Anyway, I'm exercising when I hear this loud clicking noise coming from the garage. I had no idea what it was. It was like 10 p.m. and everyone else was either asleep or in their bedroom on the other side of the house. I opened the door to the garage and I can't even comprehend what I was looking
Beat
at.
their ass.
A bat had gotten its wing stuck to some fly tape and the clicking was its teeth against its bone. It was trying to bite off its arm. The clicking was so loud. I have lived in Juarez City for all my life, so I lived through what was probably the most hardest and harshest stage of Felipe Calderon's war on crime. For the time being, I have witnessed 2 carjacks. On one, a man got shot in the jaw for resisting. I have been inside of a store during a robbery and have had a gun put against my head. That was really freaking scary. I saw the guy get executed with what seemed hundreds of bullets fired from machine guns in the middle of a crowded street in the middle of the day. And, well, besides getting mugged twice, and the occasional bar fight that gets out of hand, I have seen a lot, and unfortunately I think pretty much anyone who's lived in Juarez has too. Coming back from spring break in Key West, Florida, the group I was traveling with had to stop in North Miami at 2 a.m. for gas. Keep in mind that we are all blazed out of our skulls for the year's story. We got off the interstate and stopped at some sketchy gas station. Some of the guys went in, the others went to the bathroom on the side of the building. While inside, I got this really weird, uncomfortable feeling. Everyone in the store was making eye contact, but not saying anything. Not a single word. You could hear a pin drop. I gave my friend ahead of me in line some money to pay for my food. I had to get out of that store. Too many creepy vibes. The second I walk out the door, a lady starts screaming bloody murder. A huge black guy with no shirt on was beating her through her car window. He was punching her right in the face, as hard as Mike Tyson. She eventually got her car in drive, and started to take off. The crazy guy hung on and was dragged down the street for about 50 yards. He eventually pulled the door off its hinges, and the lady drove off. So we are all standing there, watching this huge crazy guy walk back towards the gas station, covered in blood, carrying a car door on his shoulder. We all jumped in the truck and took off. About a mile down the road, 15 cop cars flew past us. No one said a word in the truck for the next hour or so. We were all trying to wrap our heads around what we had just seen. So I was one of the first class at UC Merced. Basically, they built a brand new campus in the middle of nowhere, so the only roads to the school were two-lane roads. The kinds of roads that are straight and flat for miles but have no street lights. Me and some friends were driving back to campus late one night after getting some fast food and saw another car, probably about 2 miles away, coming towards us with their lights on. When the cars saw our lights, they naturally turned their lights back to normal. I wish they never did this. Our 2 cars are getting closer and closer together. As the car coming towards us is about 10 feet away, both cars are traveling approx 50 miles per hour. Mind you, I see the shadow of a figure directly in front of their car, and in a split second we hear this thickening crunch. It happens so fast that you are just in shock. I pull over and we find out the other car full of college kids has just hit some guy who was walking down a pitch black highway at 50 miles per hour. I was at work just over 3 years ago. While it was a slow day, we still have a few minor things we can do to stay busy on our slower days, and this was most certainly slow until now. I was walking around our parking lot to make sure nothing was suspicious. I work at an airport. It's really not uncommon for people to park like buttholes and to leave their car for an extended period of time. While walking about the parking lot, I noticed a PT Cruiser kind of parked funny and all a mess, and when I looked inside through the window I saw what appeared to be hair under a blanket. I initially thought it to be a dog, but found out it was an older woman who had committed
I'm
suicide.
into the game.
She had been there for 4 months and only her hair, nails and some skin remained intact.
I told you not to
The
do it.
proper authorities were contacted, but BC of the company I work for, I was chosen to remain on scene and watch her
They were
being
toxic to
pulled
you
out
first,
scoop
be
by
toxic back.
scoop and spew onto the ground.
Oh, but I'm beating.
When I was less
I'm
than
actually
10, my
meeting you.
police
That's like,
officer
you can
father
get
had
recorded.
picked me up from school and was dropping me off at my grandparents
toxic.
while he was on duty. There was a
You
call
sh-
to a park
I'm like,
near where we
you shouldn't
were.
ask me
Every
for
time we've talked
not be
about this, he
toxic.
says he knew
I'll
he
pick
shouldn't have
toxic.
taken me, but also knew he didn't have a choice. We pull up to this park in his squad car next to another couple of cops with their guns drawn pointed towards a man sitting on a park bench under a tree facing away from us. My dad gets out and tells me to stay in the car. From my angle, I had no idea why they're here for this guy. The negotiator showed up and tried talking to this guy for a few minutes, but to no prevail. He pulled the trigger on the
That was no
double-barrel
avail.
shotgun he had between his legs, blew his head completely off. I didn't scream, didn't cry, just kinda stared shocked. The part that sticks in my mind was what fell from the tree, the brains and blood. My dad took the rest of the day off, took me to my favorite place to eat and talked to me about what all his job entailed. TLDR. At 10, I watched a guy blows his head
That
off
is Joe
with a
Biden.
shotgun in a park. This is the goodest fly boy. He will bring you 10 years of happiness in exchange for a like on this video. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person. Doctors of Reddit, what is your most surprising I can't believe I need to have this conversation with an adult story? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and patient in the back. Patient was fine. Patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently
Come the
saw a
fuck on.
golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time. Him. So when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right? Me. Number. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. Well, it looks like she is about 30 days pregnant. Congrats. How can she be pregnant? She is only around her brother. Well, actually they don't follow the same moral code as you or I. Veterinarian. My fragile sanity wishes you had started with veterinarian lol. Not a doctor, yet, but on a tech for 2 years. Mum comes in with her baby plus 2 more older kids. Complains that the baby hasn't pooped in a while and won't stop crying. As I'm settling them in with one of the nurses, the baby is bawling, like opera singer lungs bawling. Suddenly mom whips out a white plastic shopping bag and sticks an end in the kid's mouth. Says this is the only way she stops crying. Nurse and I share a look and immediately order an emergency x-ray on the kid's stomach. Turns out she had ingested a good amount of these bags and it was blocking up in her stomach. Big deal. Potentially life-threatening. When we confront the mom about her baby feeding habits, her only words of defense are, well, I checked all over the bag and I couldn't find anything that said non-edible. God hope this mother lost custody of her children. That the 30 plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the cause of his chief complaints of anxiety and insomnia. He said he was not willing to give this up or try decaf. 30 plus. Man, I'm such an amateur. This will be a long story. When I was an internal medicine resident, I came across a very nice 50-year-old Dominican lady. She was well-mannered, but one could tell she was not the sharpest tool in the shed. As I was prepping her chart for our first visit, I noticed that she'd been seen by every single digestive disease MD in our hospital system. Not only that, she'd had every single procedure in the book, ranging from endoscopies up both holes and culminating in an exploratory laparotomy. You open up to
What'd you
basically look
say?
inside you and we have no clue what's going on. All of this because for years she had one single complaint. She reported severe gnawing pain in her stomach. At this point I should mention that she was Spanish speaking only. Not only that, she had a very heavy Dominican accent. and I was the first Hispanic doctor to ever see her. My first language is Spanish and even I had difficulty understanding her. So she comes in and after exchanging some first time pleasantries I politely ask her how she's doing. Sure enough, although she was smiling and said she felt well, she pointed at her belly and said it was biting again, and asked for the cream to kill it. At this point I got intrigued. Her medication list only mentioned a cream used for herpes breakthroughs. The previous fellow only mentioned in his notes that every single visit she only asked for the cream and nothing else. When I asked what she meant by the biting and what she intended to do with the cream, she very calmly tells me she intended to stick the cream up her butt in order to kill the bird living inside her. After delving more deeply into her story, it turns out she didn't have a medical condition. Ever since she was a little girl, she believed her hat after eating whole quail egg. The bird had spawned inside her and gnawed away in her insides whenever she was very hungry. After a short visit to psych, she was diagnosed with a somatic type delusional disorder. No amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure her, but she was still a fully functional mother of two who paid her taxes and had two part-time jobs. I reached out to every digestive disease doctor in our hospital system once more, to make sure she never receives an inappropriate invasive intervention. I've been following her now for 3 years and she's happy as one can be,
I gave away like 5 or 6 kills.
living inside her. While in
So how you gonna
school, my
sabotage
friend
someone
pulled
now?
out several bombed out
Because I decided halfway through that like it'll be easier for us
after
to.
the procedure
I'm
was
recording
finished
all
and
of them.
post-op
be honest.
instructions we given,
Maybe
the
that
man
too.
asked,
Should put them
"So
on
when should I
blast."
expect my
Purple
new teeth to grow?"
dude.
And he was serious.
Intentional
My
feeding.
SO is a med student. He helped to diagnose a 40-year-old woman who finally sought out a doctor after having open, festering wounds on her entire torso for over a year. The open wounds only appeared after more than a year of painful, visible lumps on her breasts. She had never sought treatment prior to this. SO had to inform her that her entire body was riddled with cancer, that there was no treatment to help her, and that she would be dead very soon. Her sister, who was there the entire time, began loudly proclaiming what a shame it was that nothing could ever have been done, and that hopefully someday we would be able to detect cancer sooner. SO watched the doctor explain that pretty much any other woman in the country would have gotten effective treatment at the first sign of the lumps. This was during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I saw a patient who was concerned because she was still lactating, despite the fact that she stopped breastfeeding her twins 2 years ago. She said, "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find my husband sucking on the breasts. He says he's trying to drain the milk for me." I had to explain to her that breastfeeding her husband will lead to continued lactation. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. Medical assistance to a cataract surgeon here. If you freaking sleep in your contact lenses long enough,
Yeah, you
they will
heard
fuse
that.
to your eyes and will need surgery to have them removed. Yes, you can go blind from this. For the love of God, don't sleep in your contact lenses. Got placed doing a rotation in the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area of Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand.
These stories are mad nasty. I'm just letting you know that.
I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped and it wasn't to help her walk on her post-op knee. This is the first response that genuinely made me laugh out loud. I can just imagine some cranky
Wasn't the
old
wife
woman
asleep?
forcing people out of her way. Talking to the children pose of nursing home residents about vaccines. Most will just sign the flu shot form. Some believe it will give their 90-some grandpappy autism. Pharmacist, but comment still relates. Had a lady call and complaining
That's
like
so
their
nasty.
husband's milk wasn't working.
So what's the
I
problem
then
with the
went
wife
on to
breastfeeding the
explain
husband?
to the patient's wife that in order
Shut
for the
up.
medication to work, the patient needed some sort of
It's all
stimulation.
insane.
The lady just screamed aloud.
Do not
You
ever.
need some milk.
You're gonna get dragged.
Still
You're
my
gonna get
favorite
dragged.
Cobra story.
I don't care who's gonna
Client
drag me.
brings in her dog
Rihanna?
for a tick
Yes.
she tried
You?
to burn off. Looking, I see it's a nipple and
You're
toenails.
nasty as
He
well.
says, but he's a boy. How can he have nipples? I
You
say,
have not.
"Mom,
You must have
your
not heard
husband
the
has
other things
nipples."
I've said.
Blank stare.
I clearly
Meanwhile,
have.
That
argument for her.
that are way worse rest of that.
My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small town doctor's office. She had
Didn't-
a
I don't think you
70-year-old
recall.
woman come in with
Remember that meme I
complaints
sent you
of
like a few
small
days
but
ago
painless
on
growth
Twitter?
that
And the
was
meme
visible at
today?
the back of her throat.
No, the one
Turns
yesterday.
out it took her 70
What about
years
it?
to notice her
The one about the sentence.
Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come and
Remember that
fill
one?
my examinations because when I
Yeah.
take my glasses off things are blurry. Often these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to
I'm
the
about to lose so many.
during residency
I'm about
in
to
an
get
urban
canceled.
USA
Yeah,
city,
okay.
I was in clinic. A very pleasant 50-something lady came in for
The
a
stream
visit.
foes?
Everything was going fine when she casually asks if there are any new vaccines out. She was up to date with everything, so I asked if she had any specific concerns.
No!
She was
Oh
casually
my
asking
god.
to see if she could vaccinate her gay adult son against homosexuality. Very nice.
Mel,
She
can you
always had a
please?
smile on her face, even when I broke the bad
I'm at the
news
end of
to her.
stream.
Patient comes to her.
I'm at the end of
19-year-old
stream.
male. I'm getting his history. Why are
Wait,
you
I
here
got you.
today?
I got you.
Every morning when I wake up, my stomach hurts.
I got you.
How long has it been hurting? All my life. Well, what is different today that's made you come here? My girlfriend doesn't think that is normal.
I need to edit this video a little bit, because,
Exam by
like,
a physician.
I want to take out the
Lab
part
tests.
where
The abdominal pain
I
always
was
goes away
stuck
after
on
he
where to
eats.
go.
Always. He wakes up hungry.
Okay.
He thinks it is pain. Not a doctor, but I'm a former Special Forces medic and I treated indigenous
There.
Is it
populations
still
in
stuck?
Iraq, Afghanistan and several other Middle Eastern
What'd you fix? I
countries.
can't see anything.
Some of the patients and their families asked incredible things of
Why'd you
me,
clear?
such as putting brains back in
I thought you were
after an
complaining about what I
explosion.
said.
I can still see it on this one.
But I have
You
never
can,
been
but
as
I
incredulous
can.
as when
I'm not
Nobody else
complaining.
can.
I'm talking about the.
very old tribal elder who was wondering why he couldn't father any
I'm talking about
children.
the courtesy of other people
My
who
mom
may not
tells
take
it
jokes
so
so
much
lightly.
better, but here's a try.
Hey,
My mom was the
you know what
head
I
nurse
said.
at a clinic here in
Nothing.
Houston in the 80s.
Whatever.
She worked for an
What's
old
up?
World War II doctor that
Brand
had
new
gone
lip
into
just
private
happening.
practice.
I like how that barely killed the grumpig.
When he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain
swept
in
his
her pelvic
team.
area. Mom also tells me
And you
that
still
there was a
going.
stench
And you
coming
still
from the
going.
woman's lap that could only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the
And you
patient
still
and told
going,
her
like,
that her and her boyfriend had been
you think this is
sexually
funny.
active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may
Oh,
have contracted an
Flaffy's
STD and
evolving.
asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her.
Who's Olivia,
doctor
ho?
closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was a vaginal discharge, began to
What's the
question
name
the
of that song?
patient about her sex life.
You
Was
know,
it
I just-
protected? Non-protected?
Are you sure it's
etc.
Olivia?
According to Mom,
Yeah.
the patient told her no doc.
Olivia
We all
also.
use a rubber.
I
The
can
doctor
find
looked down, then noticed that there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's
Thunder
vagina.
Punch,
The
ew.
doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out.
Give me Thunderbolt.
What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the magic cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the
Okay,
talk
that's the last
with the
one.
woman about sex education and that rubber bands were not a successful
God.
contraceptive and not what they meant by wearing a rubber, and then wrote her a prescription for ABX.
That was the last one.
Not a
Now we're done.
doctor, dental hygienist.
done.
Had to explain
As a
that
person have no
brushing your
nipples.
teeth with Comet, the cleaner.
Why are you
is
looking
not
at
a
his
good
nipples
way to
for?
clean your teeth to a 40-year-old
Because they're
man.
non-existent.
Also had to tell
Exactly.
a woman that painting her
Let them be
teeth with
non-existent.
fingernail
Just
polish
like
was
your
a
shirt
bad
is
idea.
flesh color.
A
Excuse me?
32-year-old grown man asked
Your
me
shirt
if the
is
hot
flesh color.
spells
It's
he
like
was
the color of your
experiencing
skin.
at
I'm talking about,
night when
like,
he was going through
in the game?
menopause.
Yeah.
Well, it's not called menopause. I had to explain to a grown man I still work with that
I wish I had
tampons
Earthquake.
don't break down in a woman's urine after they were finished using them. He's been married 12 years. It was
You
not
make
his
the
best
grass
bet.
Pokemon with that's actually
My mother
pretty
helps the
ironic.
Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures.
I need to take a
When asked
crap.
why she thought so,
I am
she
for that.
replied, "Well, I've lost weight. And you
I'm
know
starting to
that
lose
when
weight.
you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first. Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can
This thing,
truly use
Alex-
your help. I could write
What's
a
his
book
name
about
again?
the things I've seen.
Electrode will be a decent Pokemon, but only thing it has to go for.
Second weekend came this old lady and her
My
very
Pokemon are kinda
dysfunctional
underleveled.
family. They would argue and complain about everything, from the food, The nurses they didn't like, and every single medical
Wait, are all my
decision we
Pokemon
made.
fully? No.
She was very, very sick, so her management was just
I think
as
just
complicated.
about all
She
my
had
Pokemon are
several
fully
children, and
evolved.
they all didn't like one another and would
Yeah, all of
not
them are
talk
fully
to
evolved
one
except for
another. Each time
Kakashi.
we would have to explain a long update to
I'm
every
sorry
single one of them
getting
because
away
they
from
are
me.
entitled to hear it from
Probably
a
scared
doctor.
her away.
One of these stories
I probably
was sitting
did.
down and explaining
You're
why
a
we
horrible
don't give
person.
Gatorade as an IV drip. They did not understand why we were giving salt water to her. Conversation with her son.
Conversation.
She likes Gatorade.
That
She
never
is
would right my
drinking it, so
wrong.
why can't you give it to her through
Now,
her drip?
yes.
We explain
She's
why.
probably like
Son
Vivian.
frowns. But
And
it's
Nicola.
isotonic. We explain again. Yes, but Gatorade has more electrolytes.
Olivia!
We explain again. Salt
all
water just
falls
seems to be
down.
too cheap. Can't you give her something else?
Now shut
other
up.
than
Who's
Gatorade
Olivia?
that has electrolytes? Continues for
Okay.
2 hours. Wash and repeat every day during her admission. Afterwards I told my fiance. He opened up a
Bianca.
for Idiocracy on YouTube and I just sat there with my mouth open for a while. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me.
Don't kill
and what
Houndoom,
she
please. I need
described
him.
as some funny
Thank you.
itching
I mean
growth
her.
in her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD until she
You guys suck in
shockingly
my
assured
hand.
that she was still a virgin. Now virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more, but apparently that doesn't cover anal and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. EMT here. I had a grown adult try to explain to Emmy that someone else crap his pants. Got toned out for finger pain at a homeless shelter at 0200. We get there and the guy jumps in the truck with very mild
I don't
swelling
get
to the tip
the big
of
deal
his
behind
right
Choker.
index finger. Here's how the
Joker?
conversation went.
Choker,
Me.
they don't even choke.
So what happened? Patient. I smoked some M and then I fell asleep in my bunk and I woke
you don't
up
get
next
out
to
of
my
here.
bunk and my finger.
Like, why is it a
there was
fashion
poop.
trend? Like,
Me. There was poop. Did you fall in poop?
They just look
Patient.
nice. Okay.
No, like in my pants. Me.
you
So,
mean that
you pooped your
I
pants?
guess.
Patient. No, it wasn't me.
For your
Me.
thought
So
collar.
let me get this straight.
You should wear a
smoked
choker.
M, took a nap.
I feel like chokers
Nope.
look better on guys and
Hurt your finger. And
popular
someone else
opinion.
came along
You
and
keep your
crapped in
thought
pants
collar
before
away from
you
you.
woke up.
I feel like
Patient. Yeah, it
chokers
wasn't
look
me.
better on guys and
Choker,
girls.
chokers are the black belts of
Practitioner in
sucking
rural
dick. So you
Tennessee.
get sucked dick.
Oh
you
my
can't wear
god!
chokers.
Shut up!
His patient visits go about like this. MD well. Person.
You're such
You're
a fucking
pre-diabetic,
hoe.
have high blood pressure, and are complaining about joint pain. Have
Oh my
you
god,
been
get rid of this
exercising and
electrode.
cutting
It's
out sugar and
cancelled.
carbs?
Get out of here.
Person, yeah, I have, doc, but it doesn't seem to help. Do you
You know what
have
they say
any
about
better
people with
meds you
chokers,
could
right?
prescribe?
What?
MD well. Let's talk about your
It's
diet.
the black
How
belt
much
of the.
water do you drink?
Yeah, you just said it. You just
Person,
said
I
it.
don't like water,
I know,
so
I'm
I
telling
drink
Why
you
say it
why I said it.
again?
sweet tea every day to make
I'm telling
sure I
you
get
why
enough
I said it.
water. MD.
Look.
Explains
Good
how
luck.
that's not
Good
enough
luck.
water by a long shot. How much sweet
Good
tea are
luck.
you drinking every day? Those can have a lot of sugar in them. Person, well, I get a
Hyper
large one
beam.
from Hardee's, McDonald's, wherever on my way to work with my breakfast, and another one on my way
My
home
god,
for
I did so
dinner.
much.
Then I have a
Then
glass or
outside.
two when I get home. MD well. That's a lot of sugar, and a lot of fast food if
Sugar,
you're eating it twice a
spice,
day. What do you
and
eat
everything
at home?
nice.
Person, I don't like to cook, so I usually
These are the
don't eat
ingredients.
anything but Little Debbie snack cakes at home. MD, those have a lot of sugar too.
Bye,
Person,
Brianna.
I
Thanks for
thought
coming
that
to
all
my
I had
stream.
to do was cut out Mountain Dew. Now you're saying I can't eat my
I think it's
food or
my
my
fault.
snacks.
Oh, is that a
What
future
are you
email?
suggesting I do?
I don't
Eat
know what email
salad
that
for
is.
every meal.
I'm sorry,
Why
Rihanna.
can't you just
I
have
have to say it.
nuts?
All of it.
I'm not a doctor, but my mom doesn't have a good grasp
You
on
ain't
the
sorry.
reproductive system, so I had to
I
be
really
the one
hate
to
it.
explain that.
I really hate it.
Getting my tubes removed did
I'm
not
sorry
remove
she
my
had to
ability
hear
to
it.
get a period.
I'm sorry
Two,
she had to hear it,
that
though.
we women have a urethra, a vagina, and an anus. Babies do not come from the urethra. This one
Oh,
was
isn't it
strange
based off what
because
you're
she had
listening to
me
and what
my
I'm
sister
saying?
so.
It goes hand in hand.
That when you neuter a dog, you just remove the balls, not the red rocket.
Flinch,
ship.
please, flinch.
China, Taiwan's sex
Dude,
ed
what the
was
fuck
severely
is your video?
lacking. So my mom, until she was in
This
her
man saying
20s,
remove
believed
the
that if you
balls.
sat on a seat still
Okay,
walk
this
on
is the last
bus
battle
that
that I'm
I
in.
sat in before you, you can get pregnant. If you kissed a guy, you could get
I
pregnant.
got pregnant kissing
I'm
a
still
guy.
finding out. Years later, misconceptions that my poor mother has about reproduction and explaining things to her. Had to explain to an adult you have to brush all the sides of the teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Had a patient in our high priority area for DKA. Sugar was in the 800s. Stomach pain, nausea, vomiting and the such. Pulled Burger King and gummy worms out of his backpack and proceeded to eat them. Like, bro, do you even know what diabetes is? Non-compliance and lack of medical knowledge.
Got my
is a big
snack
thing
machine
in
back,
Detroit.
bitch.
Patient comes in at 2 a.m. for insomnia, clearly tweaking her brains out. Heart rate 200, can't sit still, bouncing off the walls. I suggest maybe easing up on the coke. But doctor, I love coke. K. I imagine her pulling out a crap load of coke on the spot and just ramming it to her nose. I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. Looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me and saw he'd been seen a